Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching? Now get comfortable and relax. Case 1. On the side of a deserted road in the state of Morelos, the lifeless body of a young woman was discovered. The passers-by who found her immediately contacted emergency services. The body lay motionless, her clothing appeared wrinkled and stained, and her skin showed visible signs of bruising and abrasions. No documents or personal belongings that could help identify her were found nearby. For the authorities, this marked the beginning of an investigation to shed light on what had happened and uncover the circumstances of this tragedy. Ariadna Fernanda Lopez Diaz was born on July 5, 1995, in one of the underprivileged neighborhoods of Mexico City. Her childhood was shaped by limited resources, but it was not devoid of warmth and care. Her family consisted of her mother and her older brother Omar. Despite the absence of a father figure who showed little interest in his children, the small family held together through mutual support. Omar became a role model and protector for Ariadna, offering her unwavering encouragement. Their close bond instilled in Ariadna a sense of security, knowing there would always be someone she could rely on. Ariadna was known for her warm and approachable personality, which made her popular among her peers. She had a natural ability to make friends and stood out for her sincerity and willingness to help others. Her school years were filled with the company of close friends, with whom she often shared her dreams about the future. However, her youth was marred by a profound loss. In 2018, when Ariadna was just 23, her mother was diagnosed with cancer. The illness progressed rapidly, and soon the family had to face the inevitable. Losing her mother was a devastating blow to both Ariadna and Omar. This tragedy not only strengthened their bond, but also forced Ariadna to mature quickly and take responsibility for her own life. In memory of her mother, she had her name tattooed as a permanent tribute, ensuring her mother's presence remained with her always. Before the loss of her mother, Ariadna had met a young man and soon entered into a relationship with him. Their romance moved quickly, and before long Ariadna learned that she was expecting a child. However, the arrival of her son did not bring the stability she had hoped for. The young couple soon realized their paths were diverging. After parting ways, they maintained a neutral relationship, jointly caring for their son. Becoming a mother brought new challenges. Ariadna had to balance the demands of parenthood with the search for work to provide for herself and her son. Her first step in this journey was a job at a popular bar in Mexico City. This establishment, frequented by affluent clients, had strict expectations for its staff. Here, Ariadna honed her ability to interact with a wide variety of people. Despite the difficulties, she excelled in her role, drawing on her charisma and strong work ethic to navigate the challenges she faced. The pandemic brought significant changes to her life. Losing her job due to the closure of the establishment where she worked, Ariadna refused to give in to despair. Instead, she used this period to pursue a long-held dream, opening her own beauty salon. This project became a symbol of her determination and desire to build a life independent of external circumstances. Drawing on her experience and extensive network, she successfully launched a business that provided her with a steady income. During this time, a new relationship entered her life. She met a man with whom she quickly connected. This relationship became a source of joy and stability for her. Ariadna balanced her time between her son, her work, and her partner. Her days were busy, but she managed it all, finding happiness in each new opportunity. By the age of 27, Ariadna's life resembled a completed puzzle, where every challenge and every achievement contributed to a picture of resilience and success. She had endured loss, rebuilt her life from scratch, cared for her son's future, and achieved independence. However, what seemed like the start of a happy chapter turned out to be the prelude to a tragedy. Ariadna met Vanessa through mutual acquaintances. Their interaction began at an event where Ariadna had gone with her friends. Vanessa immediately caught Ariadna's attention. Young, vibrant, and charismatic, Vanessa had a way of quickly connecting with people. However, those who knew her well had mixed feelings about her. Behind her apparent openness lay sharp edges, and her actions often surprised people with their unpredictability. Rodel, a middle-aged businessman, was a frequent presence in Vanessa's social circle. His reputation was shrouded in rumors. Known for his wealth, influence, and lavish lifestyle, He was often seen in the company of young women who sought to be part of his world. His status was bolstered by whispers of connections with powerful figures and even criminal networks, yet no one in his circle could confirm these suspicions. Rottle avoided direct conversations about his past and business dealings, but his demeanor inspired both respect and unease. Though Ariadna was intelligent and independent, she didn't immediately recognize how different her new acquaintances were from her usual circle. Vanessa, eager to impress, often boasted about her connections with influential people, including Rottle. She painted him as someone capable of solving any problem. Gradually, Ariadna began spending more time with them. Vanessa seemed genuinely captivated by Ariadna and went out of her way to gain her trust. Rottle, learning about Ariadna through Vanessa, quickly took an interest in her. At their first meeting, he impressed her with his attentiveness and conversational skills. His charm and confidence were undeniably appealing, and Ariadna was no exception to his allure. However, behind this charm was a more complex personality. Those who had dealings with Rottle noted his manipulative tendencies. Ariadna, however, saw him as a courteous and kind man. Vanessa continued to play a key role in strengthening the connection between Ariadna and Rottle. She frequently invited Ariadna to gatherings where Rottle was present, creating an atmosphere of trust and openness. However, over time, peculiar details began to surface. For instance, some of Ariadna's friends warned her to be cautious around these people. A few were aware of Rottle's questionable reputation and Vanessa's unpredictable nature. They hinted that these relationships could pose hidden risks. Despite the warnings, Ariadna didn't perceive any danger in her new social circle. She saw her friendship with Vanessa as an opportunity to take a break from her daily responsibilities and explore a world that had previously been out of reach. Rottle, on the other hand, worked to win her over by demonstrating generosity and friendliness. His invitations to dinners and parties seemed interesting and harmless to her. As we know, Ariadna was in a relationship with a young man. However, this didn't stop her from maintaining friendships and occasionally accepting invitations to social events. Based on available information, her partner was a trusting person and didn't express dissatisfaction with her social interactions. Over time, Ariadna began to notice that her new connections were starting to influence her life. Vanessa frequently called her, suggesting meetups and planning outings for leisure. Rottle, meanwhile, increasingly tried to solidify his presence in Ariadna's life, often offering help and support in various situations. Without realizing it, Ariadna was gradually becoming immersed in their world, unaware of the potential consequences. On October 30th, 2022, Ariadna accepted an invitation from Vanessa to spend the evening with friends. The gathering was set to begin at Fisher's, a popular restaurant located in downtown Mexico City. Vanessa assured her that it would be a cozy evening with a relaxing dinner and good company. Rottle was also expected to join, which gave Ariadna a slight sense of unease. Despite her growing reservations about him, she didn't want to strain her friendship with Vanessa and decided not to decline. The group came together later that evening. The restaurant, known for its trendy clientele and upscale interiors, provided a lively backdrop for the gathering. The atmosphere at the table was light-hearted and festive. Wine, cocktails, and an array of appetizers added to the celebratory vibe. As usual, Rottle made himself the center of attention, sharing stories and raising toasts. He interacted confidently with the waitstaff and went out of his way to showcase his influence. Vanessa supported him, adding jokes and commentary to keep the conversation flowing. The other guests followed their lead, trying to match the energy of the evening's hosts. Ariadna's behavior stood out amidst the lively atmosphere. She didn't appear completely at ease, frequently checking her phone, reading messages, and typing out responses. Her gaze often lingered on Rottle, as if she were searching for some hidden meaning in his actions or words. Vanessa made efforts to distract her, pulling her into conversations and encouraging her to try another cocktail, but Ariadna remained reserved. Her expression revealed that something was troubling her more than the setting around her. Midway through the evening, Ariadna posted a message on her social media. "Would you miss me if I disappeared?" This post sent a ripple of concern among her close friends and family, though many in her broader circle dismissed it as a joke. However, those who knew Ariadna well noted that she had never written anything like this before. The post left an uneasy impression, though no one could have predicted it would be her last. As the evening went on, the group decided to move to Rottle's house. The suggestion came from Rottle himself, and Vanessa enthusiastically supported the idea, saying it would allow them to continue the evening in a more private setting. Ariadna hesitated, but eventually agreed after Vanessa urged her to join. The rest of the group followed suit, piling into Roddle's car for the short drive to his home. Roddle's house, located in an upscale neighborhood, underscored his status. The interior featured a modern design with luxurious touches. Upon arrival, the group settled in a spacious living room. The night continued with music and drinks, but Ariadna seemed increasingly uncomfortable. She stepped away several times, checking her phone and pretending to make calls. Her distant and focused demeanor didn't go unnoticed. Vanessa, observing this, began whispering with Roddle, which only heightened the tension. Closer to midnight, Ariadna announced that she wanted to head home, citing fatigue. Vanessa, however, convinced her to stay a little longer, suggesting they could leave in about half an hour. Roddle, unusually quiet at that point, occasionally glanced at Ariadna in a way that added to her unease. As the evening wound down and the other guests started leaving, Ariadna remained one of the last to depart. Tragically, no one from the group would see her alive again. The following morning, on October 31st, 2022, an event shook the community in Morelos. Two cyclists on an early morning ride stumbled upon a woman's body, lying on the side of a remote road. The area was far from any major highways, in a location rarely frequented by locals. The surroundings emphasized the tragedy: desolate terrain, sparse bushes, and an unsettling silence. The woman was clothed, but her attire was dirty and appeared damaged. Her body showed multiple bruises and what looked like contusions. Witnesses immediately reported the incident to law enforcement, who arrived several hours later. In the meantime, the cyclists took photos of the scene to document the setting and potentially aid in identifying the victim. When the police arrived, they quickly cordoned off the area and began collecting evidence. Tire tracks were found in the dirt, along with marks suggesting the body had been moved. Forensic specialists noted clear signs of a struggle, but the initial cause of death was unclear. No visible weapon-related injuries were found, making it difficult to determine the exact circumstances of the tragedy. At the time, the woman's identity remained unknown, as no documents or personal items were found with her. Hours later, photos of the body began circulating on social media, sparking widespread discussion. Among those who saw the images were friends and family of Ariadna, who had been missing since attending a gathering at Roddle's house. Recognizing distinctive features of the victim, including tattoos, her brother Omar feared the worst. He filed a missing person report with the police and suggested that the woman found might be his sister. Meanwhile, the state authorities in Morelos launched their investigation. However, the initial response from the police faced heavy criticism. Evidence collection protocols were reportedly violated, and critical traces at the scene were poorly documented. This raised doubts about the integrity and professionalism of the local law enforcement. When Ariadna's relatives arrived to officially identify the body, their fears were confirmed. Omar recognized his sister by a tattoo on her shoulder that was a tribute to their late mother. For the family, it was a devastating shock, further compounded by the condition of her body. The bruises and injuries on her face and arms clearly indicated a violent incident. However, the police's official statements at the time provided little clarity and sounded unconvincing. The family's immediate response was a call for justice. They began demanding a transparent investigation and accountability for those responsible. That same day, they reached out to friends active on social media to bring attention to the case. What started as a small campaign quickly gained traction, drawing in thousands of people. Despite the mounting public pressure, the Morelos police maintained that the death might have been the result of an accident. They stated that further investigation would depend on the completion of a forensic examination. This stance only fueled more questions and deepened suspicions that influential individuals might be involved in covering up the truth. The first people investigators contacted were Roddle and Vanessa, as they were the last to see Ariadna alive. Their statements formed the foundation of the initial theories about what might have happened. In his initial account, Roddle claimed that after the party, Ariadna decided to leave his house by calling a taxi. He stated that she seemed a little upset, but didn't show any signs of serious distress. According to him, he walked her to the door and she left, heading to an unspecified location. Vanessa supported his story, adding that Ariadna had indeed left in a taxi and hadn't mentioned her destination. However, inconsistencies in their version quickly raised suspicions. The first red flag was the lack of any evidence confirming a taxi ride. Neither Roddle nor Vanessa could provide the driver's contact information or any proof to back up their statements. Investigators later discovered that although several taxi calls had been logged in the area near Roddle's house that evening, none of the drivers reported picking up Ariadna. The second issue involved Vanessa's behavior. Her account shifted depending on the questions asked. Initially, she insisted that Ariadna had left alone. Later, she added that they'd had an argument during the party, which could have upset Ariadna. Moreover, Ariadna's friends told police that Vanessa had messaged them, attempting to suggest that Ariadna might have harmed herself, referencing the cryptic social media post Ariadna had made earlier that evening. The post, shared just hours before Ariadna's disappearance, had indeed raised questions. While her family and close friends initially dismissed it as a joke, investigators began to suspect it might reflect her true emotional state that night. Another troubling factor was Vanessa's increasingly erratic behavior. Her messages to Ariadna's friends showed that she was trying to downplay the situation and avoid providing details. In one text, she admitted she was afraid of being suspected, but didn't explain why. These signs further heightened investigators' suspicions that Vanessa might be withholding critical information. The initial findings of the investigation were inconclusive regarding the exact circumstances of Ariadna's death. However, subsequent efforts by law enforcement and independent experts unearthed crucial evidence. These findings were based on 2 autopsies, surveillance footage, and text messages recovered from the suspects' phones. The initial forensic report conducted in the state of Morelos claimed that Ariadna's death was caused by asphyxiation related to bronchial aspiration. The examiner suggested that food and alcohol in her airways might have led to her passing. However, this conclusion was immediately questioned by Ariadna's family. They pointed out the numerous bruises and injuries on her body that the report failed to adequately address. Despite the official findings, her family insisted on a second examination. Under pressure from the public and the family, Ariadna's body was sent to an independent forensic institute in Mexico City for further analysis. The results of the second autopsy completely contradicted the initial conclusions. Experts found multiple injuries, including head trauma, bruises, and evidence of physical force on her arms and legs, suggesting an attempt to defend herself. These findings confirmed that her death was not accidental or merely related to alcohol. Her passing was classified as the result of violent actions, prompting authorities to reclassify the case as a criminal act. Crucial to the investigation were surveillance videos obtained from the parking garage of Roddle's residence. One video showed Roddle carrying Ariadna's lifeless body to his car the morning after the party. The footage also captured him loading her body into the vehicle and leaving the premises. These recordings became indisputable evidence tying him to the movement of the body and its subsequent concealment. After investigators seized the phones of Roddle and Vanessa, they uncovered messages discussing their actions following the party. The texts revealed attempts to coordinate their stories for law enforcement and justify their behavior to Ariadna's friends. Vanessa expressed anxiety over the pressure from Ariadna's family, while Roddle reassured her that everything was under control. One message even contained detailed instructions on how to answer questions in a way that wouldn't raise suspicion. In Vanessa's conversations with Ariadna's friends, she repeatedly suggested that Ariadna might have been struggling with emotional distress, hinting at the possibility of self-harm. This narrative contradicted statements from Ariadna's friends, who described her as a cheerful and vibrant person with no signs of such tendencies. These inconsistencies further deepened suspicions about Vanessa's involvement. The evidence, results from the second autopsy, surveillance footage, and recovered messages, painted a clearer picture of what had happened. Investigators concluded that the initial claims of an accidental death or Ariadna voluntarily leaving Roddle's home did not align with reality. The evidence clearly pointed to the violent nature of Ariadna's death and the subsequent concealment of her body. These findings became the foundation for charges against Roddle and Vanessa, who would soon face trial for their actions. Vanessa was the first to be arrested. Investigators discovered that she had been in constant communication with Roddle in the days following the crime, discussing ways to evade responsibility. Her arrest took place under intense public scrutiny. During her initial interrogations, Vanessa claimed she had no involvement in Ariadna's death, but her statements were riddled with contradictions. Vanessa insisted that she had gone to bed early on the night of the incident and was unaware of what transpired afterward. However, A fact check of her claims revealed inconsistencies. Text messages showed she was fully aware of what had happened and had discussed the details with Roddle. Investigators also determined that Vanessa actively destroyed potential evidence by deleting photos, messages, and other incriminating information in an effort to obscure her involvement in covering up the crime. Realizing the mounting evidence against him, Roddle chose to turn himself into authorities. Accompanied by his lawyers, he proclaimed his innocence, stating that he did not harm Ariadna, but panicked and attempted to hide her body out of fear of the consequences. According to his account, he found Ariadna unresponsive in his home the morning after the party and, believing she had passed away, decided to dispose of the body to avoid suspicion. However, his version of events raised serious doubts. First, the results of the second autopsy confirmed a violent cause of death, contradicting his claims. Second, surveillance footage showed him carrying the body with clear attempts to hide his actions rather than seeking help. Additionally, his text conversations with Vanessa revealed a coordinated effort to agree on false narratives about what had happened. As the investigation progressed, alarming information surfaced about potential corruption involving Roddle and the prosecutor's office in Morelos. The initial autopsy report conducted in the state had deliberately omitted references to injuries that clearly indicated violence. Activists and Ariadna's family accused the prosecutor of using their position to shield Roddle from accountability. These allegations ignited public outrage. Officials in Mexico City launched a review of the Morelos prosecutor's actions, and an internal affairs division opened an inquiry into possible misconduct. Some witnesses alleged that Roddle had connections to criminal groups, which might explain his apparent confidence in avoiding punishment. The case gained widespread attention, becoming a symbol of systemic issues within the justice system and highlighting the role of public pressure in pursuing justice. Further interrogations and collected evidence confirmed that at least one of the suspects knew more about the events of that night than they were willing to admit. However, neither Vanessa nor Roddle accepted direct responsibility, instead focusing their statements on mutual attempts to justify their actions. Their behavior only heightened suspicions and was a key factor in their temporary detention. The motives and circumstances surrounding the tragedy that unfolded that night became the subject of a lengthy and meticulous investigation. Uncovering the truth required a careful reconstruction of events, analysis of evidence, and a close examination of the behavior of everyone present at the party. Gradually, a clearer picture began to emerge, pieced together from conflicting testimonies, technical data, and psychological profiles of the suspects. That fateful evening began at a restaurant in downtown Mexico City, where Ariadna, Vanessa, and Roddle, joined by mutual friends, enjoyed dinner and drinks. Outwardly, everything seemed ordinary: laughter, conversation, and music, but subtle details hinted at underlying tension. According to witness statements and an analysis of text messages, Ariadna appeared unusually quiet and preoccupied. She frequently checked her phone, sending messages and answering calls, behavior that was uncharacteristic for her at social gatherings. This detail became critical later in the investigation. Her messages revealed that she had been texting a close friend, expressing unease about the party and concerns about some of the attendees. After leaving the restaurant, the group headed to Roddle's house. The property, surrounded by high walls and equipped with security cameras, was a frequent venue for private gatherings. Vanessa and Roddle acted as the hosts, but their dynamics seemed tense. Witnesses noted that Vanessa made several sharp remarks toward Ariadna, which the latter received with composure, trying to avoid confrontation. As the night progressed, alcohol began to influence the group's behavior. Vanessa, already emotionally charged, reportedly raised her voice multiple times, accusing Ariadna of being disrespectful and unfriendly. These accusations didn't resonate with others in the group, but added to the escalating tension. Roddle, meanwhile, appeared to remain neutral, but was visibly uncomfortable with Vanessa's behavior. A pivotal moment came early the next morning, when witnesses reported seeing Ariadna attempting to leave the party. She was briefly seen outside the house, but returned shortly afterward. Investigators determined that, during this time, Vanessa continued to confront Ariadna, leading to an open conflict. While the exact details of the altercation remain unclear, investigators suspect that Vanessa accused Ariadna of drawing too much attention from Roddle. Messages retrieved from the phones confirmed that Vanessa and Roddle had discussed tense moments from that night. After most of the guests had left the party, only a few people remained in the house, including Vanessa, Roddel, and Ariadna. According to investigators, Vanessa, who was reportedly heavily intoxicated, began displaying aggressive behavior. It was during this time that an incident is believed to have occurred, resulting in the fatal injuries sustained by Ariadna. Why did Ariadna post such a strange message on social media that night? Initially dismissed as a joke, the post took on a different meaning as the investigation unfolded. Friends later confirmed that Ariadna may have felt uneasy due to Vanessa's behavior and the overall atmosphere at the gathering. The post might have been a way to express her discomfort, attract attention, or perhaps even serve as a subtle warning. The reconstruction of events suggests that Vanessa's jealousy, exacerbated by alcohol and emotional instability, played a central role in the tragedy. Roddel, likely attempting to cover up what had happened, only worsened the situation with his actions. This combination of factors led to the devastating outcome, which might have been avoided if the party's environment had not been so tense and volatile. Ariadna's 6-year-old son was left in the care of her older brother, Omar. As the only father figure in the boy's life, Omar stepped in to provide not only financial but also emotional support. He took on the responsibility of raising his nephew, striving to preserve memories of Ariadna and surround him with the love she had always given during her life. This decision brought the family closer together, as other relatives and friends also contributed to helping the boy cope with his loss and providing him with a nurturing environment. Ariadna's family remained active in the fight to uncover the full truth about her death. They organized protests, launched social media campaigns, and garnered public attention. A significant achievement was drawing the focus of international media, which helped increase pressure on the Mexican judicial system. The preliminary court hearings regarding Ariadna's death became a pivotal moment in the pursuit of justice. Despite resistance from certain authorities, the family and their legal team ensured that the case was handled transparently, with all relevant evidence considered. Each step of the investigation and trial was closely monitored by the public and the media, leaving little room for any facts to be hidden or distorted. The trial began with a focus on the roles of Roddel and Vanessa. During court proceedings, prosecutors presented key evidence, including surveillance footage, phone call records, and data from text messages. These materials demonstrated not only the suspects' involvement in concealing the body, but also their potential role in the violent actions that led to Ariadna's death. The defense attempted to challenge the evidence, arguing that the tragedy was an unfortunate accident. However, numerous testimonies and forensic analyses cast significant doubt on that version of events. One of the central objectives of the trial was to determine the motives behind the crime. Witnesses familiar with Vanessa described her as impulsive and prone to aggressive behavior, which was often exacerbated by alcohol. Roddel, on the other hand, was portrayed as someone with a questionable past and alleged ties to criminal networks, raising additional concerns about his involvement in the events of that night. While the defendants denied responsibility for Ariadna's death, their statements were inconsistent with the evidence, further fueling suspicions. A verdict in Ariadna's case has not yet been reached, as the investigation and court proceedings remain ongoing. Based on the evidence gathered, prosecutors have filed charges for her death, with the case potentially classified as femicide, a crime involving gender-based violence, which is considered an aggravating factor under Mexican law. If convicted, both defendants could face up to 70 years in prison. Case 2. 37-year-old Michael Patton was booked into jail for capital murder of multiple persons. Around 7:20 p.m. on February 19, 2021, Salina police officers were called to the 3100 block of Hickory Lane in response to a shooting. The caller was identified as 39-year-old Michael Patrick Patton, who reportedly told the 911 dispatcher that he had just shot his wife and that there was a fire in the master bedroom of his home. He would say his children were inside and that he was outside standing with a gun in his hand. En route to his location, Patton made a second 911 call, contradicting his initial statement and claiming he had no idea what happened to his family. By the time firefighters from the Salina Fire Department and police officers arrived on scene, Patton handed over his gun and allowed firefighters to look for any survivors inside his residence. Now they found his wife, 36-year-old Tamara Jo Patton, and his kids, Kendall and Evan, with gunshot wounds. They also found the family's 3 dogs and 1 cat burned to death. Patton was taken away for questioning, and this was the moment his story took a wild turn. You see, on paper, Michael Patton was a genius. He worked for the defense contractor Raytheon as a rocket scientist, boasting an exceptionally high IQ. But even with that, Patton just couldn't outsmart a murder charge. I feel like I need somebody to help me with what's going on, because I don't have any idea what's going on. At the start of his interrogation, Patton put his brilliance to the test by claiming he had no idea what was going on. He was also cautious enough to refer to his son with autism, using present tense to seem as if he had no idea he was already dead. And when the detective wanted more on the story, he said this: "Why do you think we're here today? I'm confused on why we are here. You don't remember anything from today. The guns and what's in there. So what's the problem?" She said the only way out was to make some food. Michael tried shifting the blame to his wife, trying to deceive the detective into thinking she killed his kids before killing herself and setting the whole place on fire. He even made up a fake story about how she once took a gun and attempted to take her own life. "I'm trying to get the gun away from her. After about 2 hours, I got it away from her." The idea was to pin all 3 deaths on his wife, even though Patton clearly stated himself in his 911 call that he was the killer. Middle school or high school, Shewood Counseling just recently told me that the detective clearly wasn't buying this BS, and was more interested in what happened that day than his wife's childhood history. So when he asked Patton for the truth, he gave this ridiculous reply: "Why do you think you're having trouble focusing, or why do you think you can't remember stuff from today? I don't know about concussion in high school. It's on my short term. The long-term memory isn't always there." He claimed to have short-term memory, yet he wasn't hesitant to talk about the things his wife did a few months back or what he knew about her childhood. When they probed further by asking if Patton at least remembered what he ate that day, he went silent. Turns out Patton wasn't a genius, because if he was, he should have asked for a lawyer right from the start. But anyway, he eventually found out that his performance wasn't Oscar-worthy and that he'd be going to jail. "You're going to be taken over to the Collin County Jail. You're going to be under arrest for capital murder." Capital murder. December 2022, Michael Patton was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. I guess he learned the hard way that dodging a murder charge isn't exactly rocket science. Isaiah was a little bit too confident when describing how he murdered his grandparents in their own home. He might have fancied himself a clever mastermind, but in reality, he was nothing more than a fool. During his interrogation, he tried feigning remorse by shedding tears and had no hesitation in confessing his crimes. However, his true emotions came to life when it was time to discuss the guns used in both murders. For context here, Isaiah Sweet's parents, Stacy Sweet and Christopher Galley, were never married, but were together for about 5 years. Both had a history of drug abuse, with Stacy openly admitting to a cocaine addiction. Now, when Isaiah was just 4 years old, he was sexually assaulted by a neighbor. This traumatic event forced Stacy to place Isaiah in the care of her parents, Richard and Janet Sweet. Now, Stacy knew she didn't have the best parents, with all the verbal and physical abuse she went through, so it was far from an ideal situation. But after getting abandoned by Christopher, and with other children to care for, she felt she had no other choice but to leave Isaiah with her parents. And that turned out to be the worst decision she could have ever made, because her parents raised this little kid to be a monster. They moved to Iowa when Isaiah was 7 years old, and made sure he never got to speak with his mom. Now, he was abused by his grandfather, Richard, and would also drop out of high school in his junior year, with a grade point average of 1.061. Now, despite those poor grades, Isaiah would brag to his classmates about his intelligence, and kept acting like grades didn't matter. Now, to him, maybe they didn't matter because outside of school, he got himself in trouble with the law, stacking up a long list of criminal records, from curfew violations and possession of illegal drugs, to sexual assault and theft. Now, at some point, he had planned to move to Pennsylvania to live with his mom and attend Penn State University. But let's just say his rebellious ways had caught up with him, and those dreams never came true. May 11th, 2012, 17-year-old Isaiah Sweet got tired of the constant arguments with his grandparents, so he decided to kill him. Initially, he went and got a bat and tried at least 15 times to strike the back of his granddad's head, but he just couldn't bring himself to do it. So instead, he went and took an assault rifle from his grandparents' room and loaded it with hollow point rounds. He knew they would do the most damage, with his grandparents' death being painless. I had the earplugs on and everything. I took a point like this, stepped up one stair so I could see my grandma's head. Boom, pulled the trigger back, pulled the bolt back, shot my grandma twice in the head. He describes how he shot his grandparents like he was talking about some action movie. She moved right after I shot her. Okay, did she look at you? Did she say anything after you shot her? she like twitched, and I thought, maybe all it's probably just the twitch they get after they die. Isaiah left out a few key details to his story. For one, he claimed to have kissed his victims on the forehead after they were dead, but there were no bloodstains on his clothes to back that up. After the murders, he grabbed a sawed-off shotgun, a knife, an assault rifle, a TV, some clothes, and $9 from his grandparents' wallets before leaving their house. He then stashed the rifle and shotgun with some friends and drove to Cedar Rapids, where he hopped between 8 different apartments, making his drug deals and partying hard. And at these parties, he would even brag to his friends and girlfriend about the murders. So the following day, he was arrested for driving with a suspended license, and when asked about his guardians, Isaiah had lied that his grandparents were at a medical institution for elderly people. Now, what he didn't know was that his neighbors had already made 18 calls to 911, reporting his grandparents' death. And when Isaiah was confirmed to be a suspect, he was arrested and interrogated just like we've seen. But one thing throughout the interrogation was that Isaiah thought he was some type of good citizen for cooperating with the cops. He believed that he'd get a reduced sentence in court, but no way that could have happened. This guy kept contradicting himself and making up fake scenarios. And of course, he had to brag a little more about that at this point. I'm sure you'll all agree that Isaiah wasn't just a fool, but a narcissistic, egotistical maniac who had no idea what he was doing. He eventually got served with justice and was handed a life sentence with the possibility of parole. As of right now, you can find him at Iowa State Penitentiary in Fort Madison. The night of February 27, 2021, Warren Barnes, a homeless man living outside of downtown businesses in Grand Junction, Colorado, was sleeping under a bridge when his life was taken away in the strangest way imaginable. Brian Coe, who was 19 years old at the time, had been plotting to murder someone for the past 6 months. He craved the rush of knowing what it would feel like to take a life. Now he was looking for homeless people or prostitutes because he believed society didn't care about him. So on this day, Brian Coe had been passing through the area when he spotted 69-year-old Warren Barnes sleeping. Coe approaches Barnes with a knife, a mask, 3 layers of gloves, and proceeds to brutally murder him. Coe had seen Barnes laying under this canvas upon arriving. He walked up to him, knife in hand, pulled back that canvas, and stabbed him in the neck. Now Barnes tried to fight, screaming out for help, but Coe just kept on stabbing him until he was dead. During the attack, Coe partially decapitated Barnes, so he would further mutilate his body and place a few of his body parts into plastic bags before driving home. Now here's the thing. After Coe changed out of his outfit and stored Barnes' body parts in his closet, he tried catching some sleep, but got anxious thinking that maybe he left some fingerprints behind. So he drove back to Barnes' body, put it in his trunk, and headed for the Colorado River, where he dumped it into the water. However, as he tried to leave, his car slid into the river and got stuck. The police were called to the scene and found Coe, but he was released without suspicion. He returned home with his hopes, thinking that his crime remained undiscovered, and it did, until his mother made a shocking discovery. You see, about a week later, Coe's mom, Terry, discovered a plastic bag filled with maggots in his room while helping him tidy up. She took it to the kitchen sink and called Brian's father to open it up, and they soon discovered that it was a decaying human head. Therefore, the couple immediately calls the cops, and Brian was taken away for questioning. During his interrogation, he wasted no time in confessing to his crime. He was also proud in describing just how he got on top of Barnes to murder him. And how did you get here? I heard someone. Okay, this is him. I was strapped on top of him like this. Okay. And she couldn't fight back. It was actually surprising to me, because they're like breaking the sweat. I'd buy it. Oh my God. And if you care enough to know why he committed that murder, well, here's your answer. Well, I was willing to do anything, whether it be good or bad, just to gain notoriety, fame, influence. Now, apart from the fact that he showed zero remorse for his crime, Brian kind of got cocky by thinking he had the law all figured out. He told the detective the most amount of years he was going to get for the murder. So Murray's going to jail for 15 years, probably. I have no idea. I mean, I'm going to jail for 20 probably. And while it seemed like he didn't care that much, he was completely wrong. He thought he was going to get 15 to 20 years, but eventually he would get a life sentence without the possibility of parole, meaning he's spending the rest of his life in jail. The next 15 years of my life, book, set in stone prison. I go back tonight. Don't mistake that for Brian feeling remorseful. If he could go back in time, he wouldn't change a thing only because he wouldn't want to get caught. Maybe whether it was Barnes or someone else, Brian was bound to take a life eventually. I think you are a serial killer. You're wrong. I think you did kill these women. I think these families of these women, they need justice. Here we have Piers Morgan taunting a convicted killer about the dozen women he claimed to have murdered before later recanting his confession. Now Mark Rebbe is currently serving a life sentence in a Florida prison for the 1988 murder of pregnant mother, Donna Callahan. But just 1 year into his sentence, Rebbe began sharing some gruesome details of multiple other unsolved murders. He later claimed that he had been tricked by the U.S. government into those confessions and adamantly maintained his innocence ever since. During this ITV serial killer documentary, he sat for an interview with Piers Morgan. And let's just say things didn't turn out as he may have imagined. The interview began with Piers trying to find out why he made those confessions in the first place. He then tried cutting off the interview early when Morgan confronted him with photos of his alleged victims. Over a period of time that you killed 13 women. This is what Detective Haley has put out. This was supposed to be. I understand. Nothing like this. I see where you've been and got all your information. Mark Rebbe seemingly had a normal upbringing from a fairly large family. He was raised by his parents who loved him, as well as his 2 sisters and a brother in Florida. After high school, he did a brief stint in the Army and returned back to Florida, where he proceeded to have 4 marriages and 5 children. He was never really on the radar of police until his half-brother, Alex Wells, while serving a lengthy prison term for an attempted abduction, as well as a convenience store robbery, confessed in a prison Bible study group that he had participated in killing a woman. Some inmates overheard that confession and alerted the authorities. Police called Alex in for questioning, and he revealed that he and his brother, Mark Rebbe, went to a convenience store with the intent to rob it. However, they ended up strangling 29-year-old Donna Callahan to death before dumping her body in the woods. Mark was arrested and convicted of first-degree murder, leading to his 25 years to life. But while incarcerated, Rebbe began confessing other murders to his mother and sister. Detective Dennis Haley was brought in to question him, and he admitted to killing 12 girls and women. Now, since women were his primary victims, he must have harbored some kind of hatred for them, right? So Piers Morgan was determined to find that out. Do you like women? Yes. I'm not personal to my dad. Do you respect women? Yes, I do. I do. But if he didn't hate women, and if he didn't commit all those murders, then why did he confess to them in the first place? That's a question Piers wanted an answer to. And when Special Agent Dennis Haley, the man Rebbe allegedly confessed those murders to, was asked, he had this to say. No, there's just too many details about certain murders. He had information that only the killer would have had. Rebbe took cops to the location where some of those crimes were committed. But now he claims that none of that ever happened, and he only made that confession because he feared his son was in danger. So, an investigating agent gives you all this information, and now he says you gave it to him. I call it the deal with the devil. I mean, is any of this even believable? He just kept spewing a ton of garbage, from claiming he was protecting his son, to saying Agent Haley used him to promote his career. Now keep in mind that Haley is just a special agent investigating crime every day. So how could he have possibly wanted to make a great career out of Rebbe's confession? Now to some extent, it was pretty obvious that Mark Rebbe wasn't being truthful to Piers, and definitely wasn't being truthful to himself. So Piers had to call him out on it. You see, Mark, I don't believe you. I don't believe you. I don't care. I think you are a serial killer. You're wrong. I think you did kill these women. Faced with the truth, Rebbe tore his mic apart and stormed out. Why don't you sit here like a man? I know I'm not a 110-pound woman that you can kill. You did kill them, didn't you? We start, though, with breaking news. 2 parents are convicted of killing their newborn baby. I'm innocent. I didn't do it because there was no evidence whatsoever that proved anything about me putting my hands on my kids. I've never done it, and I never would. This is Chris McNabb, a man convicted of killing his own daughter. But rather than yielding to the hands of justice, McNabb tried challenging the judge, only to regret his actions almost immediately. October 7, 2017, McNabb's wife, Courtney Marie Bell, reported to the cops that her daughter was missing from a bedroom in the trailer park where they lived. The following day, her daughter's lifeless body was found in a wooded area right next to the trailer park. She had died of blunt force head trauma. Bell and McNabb feigned ignorance of what must have happened. They claimed someone might have broken into their trailer park and taken their daughter away while they slept. Now their story seemed quite odd, and law enforcement did some more digging, only to uncover a crazy truth behind what exactly happened that day. For years, McNabb and his wife were meth heads. It was more of a sickness than an addiction. Plus, there were also previous reports of domestic violence between the couple. But trust me when I say that's not even the worst part yet. On the morning of their child's disappearance, McNabb and his wife claimed they fell asleep around 5 a.m. and woke up at 9:30 to a text from McNabb's father. They stated that at 9:30, their 2-week-old baby, Kalia, and their 2-year-old daughter, Clarissa, were both safe and sound. But by around 10:30, they woke up again to a toddler yelling that Kalia's gone. Their story didn't add up, because despite claiming to have fallen asleep at 5 a.m., Facebook shows that McNabb changed his profile pic just before 6 a.m. and sent a message to a lady named Courtney Morris at 9:42. So if McNabb claims the killer broke in at around 10:30, that's a ridiculously small time frame for anyone to have let alone kidnap a child without raising an alarm. Now Kalia was found in a gym bag, wrapped in a blanket and an outfit belonging to McNabb. There was also a pair of brown shoes found beside this bag, which McNabb claimed must have belonged to the kidnapper. However, that was later disputed, as McNabb actually dropped off those shoes a week earlier while spending time in the woods. Now here's the thing. There wasn't any physical evidence to pin McNabb and his wife to the murder, but prosecutors did anyway, and McNabb was pretty pissed about it. Before his sentencing, the judge presiding over the case, Judge John Ott, asked McNabb if he had anything to say to the court, giving him room to pour out his frustration on everyone. I was beat as a child and I don't agree with it at all. And I would never do it. I would never do this. That's all I gotta say. I would never do it. I'm innocent. The judge asks McNabb one simple question. You claim you're innocent, so you tell me what sentence the man or woman that you claim did this should receive. And his reply changed the course of his life forever. If you ever find out who did them, they deserve to be under the jail. Okay, so they ought to get the maximum sentence. Most definitely. Okay, and we mean that literally. On the crime of malice murder, I sent you to life in confinement without parole. On consuming the death of another, I sent you to 10 years of confinement consecutive or after. Judge Ott inadvertently let McNabb choose his own sentence. Talk about being savage. And best believe his wife wasn't safe from that savagery either. She was also handed a 30-year sentence with the latter 15 to be served on probation. But you and I know you did this. No, I did not. That don't even make sense. It does make sense. Okay, getting humbled by the law is one thing, but getting humbled by the law and Pierce Morgan is a whole different thing. And we'll explain why. In 2008, Kimberly Clark Sines was arrested on suspicion of murdering at least 5 patients at a Texas dialysis center by injecting bleach into their dialysis lines. The center, DeVita Incorporated, experienced a sudden surge in patient deaths over just 5 months, with a shocking number of fatal heart attacks and cardiac events. This alarming trend was highly unusual, prompting law enforcement to investigate every staff member. Their investigation, however, ultimately revealed who Kimberly Sines truly was. I did have a good life and subsequent another marriage and another child, and I was very happy. Born in 1973, Kimberly had an almost perfect life growing up. She had a loving family and married her high school sweetheart. However, by adulthood, she found herself living outside Lufkin, a small town in East Texas. And by 2007, her life began just falling apart. First off, her husband files for divorce. That same year, she was arrested for public intoxication and criminal trespassing after a domestic disturbance with her husband. And although they would eventually reconcile, Kimberly just wasn't the same anymore. April 28, 2008, Kim shows up to work and was told by her supervisor that she had been reassigned that day to work as a patient care technician. This didn't sit well with Sines, who felt that role was beneath her. Subsequently, 2 patients at the clinic saw Sines prepare a bleach solution and pour it into a container on the floor. The witnesses claimed to see her draw the bleach up into a syringe and then inject it into the 4 lines of 2 other patients receiving dialysis. Her supervisor confronts her, but Kim says that she was only using bleach to clean the lines of the unused dialysis machine, a common practice at the clinic actually, and only used a syringe to get the precise measurement needed. She would deny giving anyone medication or injecting bleach into their 4 lines. She was eventually fired while this investigation went on, and alas, they found that bucket of syringes Kim had been using on the patients all tested positive for bleach. She was arrested and convicted of murdering 5 patients while leaving 5 others injured. Now, Kim spared the death penalty, but was given life in prison without the possibility of parole. However, despite numerous testimonies from witnesses and even evidence against her, Kim maintains her claim of innocence. And if there was anyone outside the courtroom to verify that, Piers Morgan's the guy. There's just a lot of things that was never said, and I believe it's time to speak out, and I find you a very reputable person, and I was trusting you with the story. In this interview for Fox News with Piers Morgan, Kimberly tried painting the narrative that she was being framed by the shady dialysis clinic she worked for. There was a lot of things that happened, and I was falsely accused of something, and that's why I'm here today, but I know that I didn't do anything that would have done anything to harm another patient. Now, while Kim was working at this clinic, a patient she was accused of murdering ended up with multiple bruises on her arm. Kimberly was responsible for caring for this patient, so when Piers asked her about these bruises, she tried to avoid the question. They would drop her off in the waiting room, and half the time, they wouldn't even tell anyone she was there, and we would have to go looking for her, and it's very sad. And when he pushes further, her explanation was way off. Do you know how she got the bruises? I could not physically lift her into the chair. I was too short. You wouldn't need to lift her to create bruising, right? I mean, you could. Yes, well, yes, sure. So if that didn't make sense to you, well, it's because nothing she said actually made any sense. On the outside, she doesn't seem like a wants to kill, and even on the inside, Kimberly didn't believe she was a killer. And you to kill somebody deliberately? Do I? No, not at all. Go ahead and believe whatever you want, but reality says that Kimberly killed all those people. Isn't there all lying? Yes. It's you that's lying here. I don't think you've looked into all of it. At this point, Piers Morgan hit her with that same reality. Sometimes the easier thing is just to admit it. That's the path to atonement. You're in denial to yourself. And just like she has done for more than a decade, she runs away from the truth. I really thought you were going to help me. Help you what? Help me to get the truth out. Thanks a lot. I think we did get the truth out. I guess he got in your pockets, too. December 2017, Ellis Nelson was convicted for murdering his girlfriend's son, Giovanni Mays, whom he'd been living with and caring for. Ellis started dating Sonia Hernandez, Giovanni's mother, a year before this tragedy. The couple were living peacefully until Sonia Hernandez introduced Ellis to her children. And this, for some reason, angered Ellis. And it got worse when Hernandez brought him over to live with her and Ellis. And one of her kids was frequently abused by him. The child sustained many injuries here and there. But ultimately, in July 2017, this abuse led to his death. Now, Ellis and Hernandez were both arrested for murder. They each denied murdering Giovanni and pled not guilty in court. At his sentencing, Ellis insisted on his innocence, claiming he never harmed Giovanni and was only trying to help. He flared up as the judge went over the evidence at the trial, and he just couldn't bear to hear the words the judge called him. Some of the bruises were in the shape of a belt buckle. I'm not going to let you play. I'm not going to let you sit here and say this. You put this child and other childs in a... Sheriff deputies had to step in and lead him out to the courtroom hallway. By the time he returned, though, the judge presiding over the case, Judge Mark Trusek, went all out in humbling him. On the conviction of first-degree murder, Ellis was given life in prison without the possibility of parole. And then he got an extra 80 to 150 years in prison for first-degree child abuse. You are the lowest form of human life. You're a monster, and quite frankly, you're evil. You should never be allowed out of prison. You will die in the prison system. On the flip, Sonia Hernandez also got some jail time. She was given 57 months to 10 years in jail after being found guilty of second-degree child abuse and perjury. It is disrespectful to me that you think I would come in here purposely and treat this like a joke or a game. Your life is not on the line. Mine is. November 21st, 2021, 39-year-old Darrell Brooks barreled through Waukesha, Wisconsin's annual Christmas parade in a red 2010 Ford Escape, going about 40 miles an hour, ignoring barricades and a police officer who tried to stop him by banging on the hood of his car. Brooks plows through the crowd like hot knife through butter. The entire incident was live-streamed, which really blew up on social media. But the real shocker, the man behind the wheel, was none other than Math Boy Fly, a Milwaukee rapper you've probably never heard of. While Math Boy Fly, real name Darrell Brooks, might not be topping any charts, he's been making his mark in a different way, through a long rap sheet dating back to September 1999. However, just 3 weeks before the parade, he was arrested for running over his ex-girlfriend with the same SUV during a domestic dispute at a gas station. And if you needed any more proof that this guy had completely lost it, his antics during the trial were outrageous enough to be legendary. After the SUV was linked to Brooks, he was slapped with 5 counts of first-degree intentional homicide. The case blew up nationwide, catching the attention of First Lady Jill Biden. As the investigation dug deeper, Brooks faced an avalanche of 77 more charges, including 61 counts of first-degree recklessly endangering safety with a dangerous weapon, 6 counts of hit and run involving death, and a couple counts for felony bail jumping and domestic abuse. Nonetheless, that's when the real courtroom circus began. Now, despite knowing almost nothing about the law, Brooks decided to represent himself in court. Judge Durow, who had the patience of a saint, had to put up with Brooks's constant interruptions, backtalk, glaring, and any other outbursts that actually got him kicked out of the courtroom more than once. It was pure chaos from start to finish. "You need to stop right now, or you will be removed." "Remove me then." "All right, he will be removed. He cannot simply stay quiet." November 16, 2022, Brooks was handed 6 life sentences without parole, set to be served concurrently. The judge also gave him 762 years of initial confinement and 305 years of extended supervision for 61 counts of reckless endangerment. As for the 6 hit-and-run charges, he got another 150 years. Now, many say Judge Durow's verdict came from the hours of frustration she endured while presiding over the case. But for a man like Brooks, we don't think he deserves anything less. Frankly, Mr. Brooks, no one is safe from you. This community can only be safe if you are behind bars for the rest of your life. I am not sorry for something I didn't do, and I am not sorry for the things I did. That was the moment Ronnie O'Neal finally pled guilty in one of the most horrifying cases you can imagine. It's March 18, 2018, Riverview, Florida. We have 29-year-old Ronnie O'Neal carrying out a series of unthinkable acts. He would shoot and kill his ex-girlfriend, Kenyatta Barron, before subjecting his daughter, Renivia O'Neal, to unspeakable violence, ultimately killing her with an axe. At 11:43 p.m., a gut-wrenching 911 call came in from a woman in clear agony. While it's not accurate to say the police ignored it, 8 long minutes would pass before Ronnie himself called back, pushing them to act. During this call, Ronnie, an African-American, would claim to have been attacked by white demons, falsely blaming Kenyatta as the attacker. He gives the cops his address, and they arrive at the apartment by 11:49 p.m., just a minute after his call. What they found was nothing short of a nightmare. Kenyatta was unconscious and their daughter brutally murdered, and Ronnie's son stabbed and bleeding out. But Ronnie wasn't done yet. He set the house on fire, adding even more chaos to the horrific scene. This guy wouldn't go down without a fight, either. The cops had to tase him just to get him into cuffs. After spending 3 years in the Hillsborough County Jail, Ronnie was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of attempted first-degree murder, 2 counts of aggravated abuse, 1 count of arson, and 1 count of resisting arrest. During his sentencing, Ronnie probably thought he was in some kind of Law and Order sitcom, coming out saying some of the most bizarre things you've ever heard. "I'm sorry for your loss." But when he was done, the judge took control, making him understand that this was one of the worst cases he'd seen in 19 years. 19 years I've been at this job. I've seen human beings killed at the hands of others in every way imaginable. This is the worst case I have ever seen as far as the facts go. Subsequently, she sentenced him to 3 consecutive life sentences, plus an extra 90 years to be served concurrently. She wasn't only disgusted by his actions, but by his sheer lack of remorse. This guy needed a reality check, and there was no better person to give it to him than that judge. And as of right now, he's locked up for the rest of his life. I would submit that this case is probably the most difficult and shocking case that this county in St. Johns County has dealt with. That was the cold, emotionless reaction of 14-year-old Aiden Fucci as he got sentenced to life for murdering a high school cheerleader, Tristan Bailey. His reaction might have not been crazy, but his actions leading to his crime definitely were. May 9, 2021. Tristan's body was found just hours after her family reported her missing. For context, Tristan Bailey was one of Stacy and Forrest Bailey's 5 kids. She was a student and cheerleader at Patriot Oaks Academy in Florida. Aiden Fucci also attended that school and lived just a few blocks away. They weren't particularly friends, but Fucci had a disturbing obsession with her. During his court hearing, Aiden's girlfriend, whose identity wasn't disclosed, revealed that Aiden had this crazy obsession with killing. She said he talked about it a lot, and even shared plans of dragging someone out into the woods and stabbing them just a month before he murdered Bailey. It was clear he needed help, but before he could get any, his dark thoughts led him down that path of evil. On said day, Aiden asked his friend for Bailey's phone number. Once he got it, he lured her, via text, to come over to a mutual friend's house. Surveillance footage catches him walking down the street, where her body would later be found. And an hour and 45 minutes go by with that same camera catching Fucci walking back alone while carrying his shoes in his hand. Bailey's body was later found with 114 stab wounds, 45 of which showed she fought back desperately. That's horrible, but it's not the worst aspect of this story. Now, while searching for Bailey, investigators found a deleted Snapchat message from Fucci to his friends. He was in the back of a patrol car, taking a selfie and holding up a peace sign. He then captioned that photo, "Hey guys, has anybody seen Tristan lately?" Now that cocky move wasn't smart, and it also made him the prime suspect. He was eventually arrested for second-degree murder, when the weapon used was traced back to him, and his clothing had Bailey's DNA all over it. Still acting like a cocky fool, Aiden and his mutual friend that helped lure Bailey made a video while sitting in the back of a cop car. What a sick, twisted kid. But all that pride went away when he was tried, not only as an adult, but given the max sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Case 3. February 2017. Nicholas Cruz buys a lot of guns, including an AR-15 style rifle, despite being diagnosed with mental health conditions. Now, who could have possibly known this would result in one of the deadliest school shootings in U.S. history and a series of lawsuits as parents sought their revenge? These are parents who took revenge on school shooters. A 14-year-old boy has shot dead 8 children at a school in Serbia. The teenager used his father's gun. December 30th, 2024, Vladimir and Melania Kekmanovic were sentenced to jail for a school shooting crime committed by their son. But then again, the entire story of how this all happened is as shocking as it is concerning. Let's go back to May 3rd, 2023. A tragic mass shooting takes place at Vladislav Ribnikar Elementary School in Belgrade, Serbia, when a 14-year-old boy shoots and kills 9 children and a security guard. Now, the boy, identified only as KK, due to his age, has reportedly planned the attack in detail, bringing 2 guns legally owned by his father into the school. Now, his victim included 8 girls and 1 boy, along with a security guard who attempted to intervene. The shooting deeply shocked Serbia, a country where mass shootings are rare. Despite widespread gun ownership, the shooter was apprehended on the scene, but couldn't be criminally prosecuted because Serbian law doesn't allow the prosecution of individuals under the age of 14. Instead, he was placed in a psychiatric institution where he remains to this day. This would leave the legal system and the victim's parents to focus on the actions of his parents, Vladimir and Melania Kekmanovic, and any others who were implicated in the circumstances that would allow this attack to occur. December 30th, 2024. A Belgrade court sentenced Vladimir and Melania after finding them guilty of crimes related to their son's actions. Vladimir, the boy's father, received a 14.5-year prison sentence for committing a grave offense against public safety and neglecting and abusing a minor. By not securing the firearms properly, he facilitated in his son's access to him. It's also known that Vladimir had taken the boy to a shooting range for target practice, a decision that was heavily scrutinized during the trial. Now Melania, the boy's mother, was sentenced to 3 years in prison for neglecting and abusing a minor. However, she was acquitted of charges related to the illegal possession of weapons and ammunition. The court also sentenced Nemanja Marinkovic, the instructor at the shooting range, where the boy had been trained, to a year and 3 months in prison. The trial drew significant public and legal attention, more specifically from families of the victims, who actively sought accountability and revenge for that tragedy. Although the boy himself couldn't be prosecuted, his parents were held responsible for their role in the events leading up to that massacre. Now the families of the victims are still pursuing legal actions against the Kekmanovic family, with many civil lawsuits still ongoing. The courtroom proceedings were closely followed, with members of the victims' families attending and expressing their grief and desire for justice. During the trial, KK was brought out of the psychiatric institution for the first time since the attack to testify against his parents. His testimony was delivered in a high-security courtroom, typically reserved for cases involving organized crime or war crimes. KK would express regret for his actions, but didn't provide an explanation for his motives. His testimony was part of a trial that aimed to determine the extent of his parents' responsibility for the events. Following his testimony, the family's lawyer told reporters that the boy had lived a normal life before the shooting, and no court process would be able to establish what had led to this attack. The sentencing of Vladimir and Melania was met with mixed reactions. Some saw it as a step toward justice. Others, particularly the families of the victims, felt that the penalties were insufficient given the scale of the tragedy. The prosecution had announced plans for harsher sentences for Vladimir and the shooting instructor, while the defense also planned to appeal those convictions. This tragedy led to widespread calls for reform in Serbia, including stricter gun control measures and greater accountability for parental negligence. In response to the massacre, the Serbian government designated May 3rd and 4th as days of remembrance for victims of mass shootings. Police say that a student at a private school killed a classmate and a teacher and hurt 6 others on campus before taking her own life. August 2024. Jeff Rupno takes his daughter Natalie to a gun shooting range. How could he have known that this little father-daughter outing would come back to haunt him in the worst way possible? December 16, 2024. A tragic school shooting happens at Abundant Life Christian School in Madison, Wisconsin. The attacker, 15-year-old Natalie Rupno, also known as Samantha, opened fire during a study hall, killing 2 people and injuring 6 others. Natalie then ended the attack by turning the gun on herself. During the incident, which took place shortly before 11 a.m., witnesses reported hearing gunshots and screams. As chaos erupted in the classroom, students and teachers scrambled to find safety, while Natalie fired indiscriminately. Unfortunately, Erin West, a teacher employed part-time by the school and known for her dedication to her students, was struck and died at the scene, as did Ruby Vergara, who was a freshman at that school and a very talented young artist. 6 others would be injured, with 2 hospitalized in critical condition. Authorities would arrive minutes after a second-grade teacher at the school made the 911 call to report the shooting, securing the school and recovering the firearms. The guns used in the shooting became a focal point of the investigation. Authorities showed that Natalie used a handgun during the attack, which she had reportedly brought from home. A second firearm was found at the scene as well, but wasn't used. Investigations would suggest Natalie had been planning this attack, possibly influenced by an online acquaintance in California named Alexander Pfaffendorf, who was also allegedly plotting a mass shooting and an attack on a government building. Pfaffendorf has since been detained by the FBI and ordered to temporarily surrender his firearms. Additionally, the police are tracing the guns used by Natalie and examining whether the parents had been negligent in their storage. Court documents would reveal their tumultuous family setting with 2 divorces, shared custody agreements, and a history of therapy sessions for Natalie. In addition to that, evidence also showed Natalie's father, Jeff Rupno, frequently would take her to shooting ranges. A Facebook photo from August 2024 shows Natalie at a range, wearing a black shirt bearing the name of the band KMFDM. Now interestingly, some of the band's lyrics had been cited by the students who carried out the 1999 massacre at Columbine High School in Colorado, where 13 people were killed. Now going to shooting ranges is legal and can be seen as a family bonding activity for some families, but critics argue it may have desensitized Natalie to firearms. The question remains whether her parents recognized or ignored warning signs that could have prevented the tragedy. However, the grieving families of Erin West and Ruby Vergara refused to let the case end with Natalie's death. The case opened and investigations ongoing. They're demanding justice not only for their children, but also for the country's systemic failures. They're ensuring that Natalie's parents are held responsible. Currently, Melissa and Jeff Rupno haven't been charged with any crime, but authorities are exploring the possibility of negligence. Under Wisconsin law, it's illegal to recklessly store firearms within easy access of mourners. Madison Police Chief Sean Barnes has also confirmed the parents are cooperating with the investigation and emphasized that determining their role is a priority. The parents of school shooter Ethan Crumbley were back in court, where they were sentenced for manslaughter in connection with their son's murder of 4 students at his Michigan school. It's November 2021 and James and Jennifer Crumbley are called to their son's school over a disturbing suicidal drawing found in his desk. Now, they would dismiss that drawing and leave him in school, but what happened shortly after got them rethinking that decision. November 30th, 2021, a mass shooting takes place at Oxford High School in Oxford Township, Michigan, when 15-year-old Ethan Robert Crumbley opens fire on students and staff with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun. The attack left 4 students dead: Madison Baldwin, Tate Meyer, Hannah St. Juliana, and Justin Schilling, and 7 others injured, including a teacher. Ethan's movements were captured on surveillance cam as he exited a bathroom armed with a gun and began shooting indiscriminately in the hallways and toward the classrooms. The shooting lasted only about 5 minutes, during which Ethan fired 32 rounds. Thankfully, students and teachers responded quickly by locking the doors and barricading classrooms, which minimized further casualties. Police would arrive within minutes of receiving the 911 calls and apprehended Ethan without resistance. Now, he would have ammunition still in his possession, along with 2 15-round magazines. In the aftermath, Ethan was charged as an adult with 24 counts, including 4 counts of first-degree murder and terrorism causing death. October 2022, Ethan pled guilty to all charges. 1 year later, he's sentenced to life imprisonment without parole, plus an additional 24 years, holding him fully accountable for the violence. This made him the first minor to receive a life sentence without parole under a 2012 U.S. Supreme Court ruling that deemed such sentences necessary in rare cases like Ethan's. However, the legal repercussions didn't stop with the shooter himself. The unprecedented nature of the case drew attention to the role of Ethan's parents, James and Jennifer Crumbley, whose actions, or lack thereof, became a focal point for the victims' families seeking justice. The Crumbleys have faced intense scrutiny for their parental decisions leading up to the tragedy. James Crumbley had bought the handgun used in the shooting as a gift for his son just days before the attack. But that's not all, because Jennifer had also taken Ethan to a gun range to practice shooting that same weekend. Moreover, hours before the incident, the parents were called to the school after a teacher found a disturbing note on Ethan's desk. It would show a gun, a bleeding person, and the words, "The thoughts won't stop, help me." I don't know what else you need there, but they still left Ethan at school, unaware or willfully negligent that he had brought the gun to campus. And to make matters worse, they didn't inform school officials that they had purchased a gun for him 4 days earlier. Now for the victims' families, the Crumbleys' actions symbolized a level of negligence that demanded accountability. Determined to see justice served, they pushed for the parents to also face criminal charges. And shortly after, prosecutors charged James and Jennifer with 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter, 1 for each student killed. But after failing to appear at their arraignment, Crumbleys became the subjects of a nationwide manhunt. They were eventually apprehended in Detroit, hiding in an art studio. Their trials were held separately, but both were convicted in 2024 of involuntary manslaughter. And on April 9, 2024, they were given 10 to 15 years in prison, making them the first parents in U.S. history to be held criminally responsible for their child's school shooting. Now during the sentencing, the victims' families gave emotional statements. Nicole Beausoleil, whose daughter Madison Baldwin was killed, expressed her anguish and frustration. Accountability can only be given if you actually try it in the first place. Those decisions that you made ultimately took my life, my daughter's life, because you decided that you didn't want to parent and listen to your son. Other parents gave their sentiments, pointing out the Crumbleys' failures to intervene despite clear warning signs. The judge had stressed the convictions weren't just about poor parenting, but repeated negligence that led to the shooting. The court also would note that the basic steps like securing a gun or even addressing their son's behavioral problems could have prevented the tragedy. Throughout the trial, Jennifer Crumbley expressed remorse, but also attempted to deflect blame onto the school, arguing that officials failed to act decisively. Now James Crumbley maintained that he didn't know about his son's intentions and wished he had acted differently. However, the prosecution argues that their gross negligence changed the lives of an entire community forever. Now the families are currently advocating for systemic changes, as they call for reform in parental responsibility, gun safety laws, and the accountability of schools in preventing this violence. Now that's not all. Lawsuits were also filed against the school district, alleging negligence and failing to act on warning signs exhibited by Ethan Crumbley. In fact, according to students and parents, rumors about threats of a mass shooting at that school were circulating way before it occurred, prompting some students to stay home the day of the incident. It's Christmas, December 2023, and Colt Gray gets an AR-style weapon from his father. And again, Who would have known that this could have resulted in one of the craziest school shootings in the history of Georgia? September 4th, 2024, a mass shooting occurs at the Appalachia High School near Winder, Georgia. The shooter, identified as 14-year-old Colt Gray, allegedly shot at 11 people, resulting in the deaths of 2 students and 2 teachers, and leaving another 8 students and 1 teacher injured. Prior to the shooting, investigations showed that Colt had meticulously planned out everything. Aside from that, the school also received a threatening call from an unknown source, claiming that 5 schools would be targeted, with Appalachia High School being the first. Carry on, a second call would come from Gray's mom, warning of an extreme emergency and urging school administrators to locate her son. Despite the warning, school authorities were unable to find him. That morning, during his first period class, Gray asked how the school would respond to an active shooter. His teacher did report the question to some staff via email, but wasn't able to inform the teacher of Gray's algebra class, where the shooting would begin. Then at 9:42 a.m., Gray sends a cryptic text to his father, apologizing and telling him that he wasn't to blame. 20 minutes later, he sends a similar message to his mom, and by 9:45 a.m., Gray had left his algebra classroom, the door locking automatically behind him, and he enters a student restroom, where he puts on yellow plastic gloves and retrieves a concealed gun from his backpack. Wrapped up in white poster board, the weapon had been placed around his lower torso. Now, around this time, another student with a similar name to Gray was mistakenly apprehended by school resource officers, following the reports of something suspicious. This mistake unfortunately delayed their ability to locate the actual shooter, and minutes later, Gray tried to return to his algebra classroom. However, as a student approached the door, he noticed the gun through the glass panel and refused to let him in, and quickly told his teacher that Gray was armed. Seeing that he couldn't get into the classroom, Gray moved to a nearby classroom instead and fired 10 to 15 rounds, tragically killing a student named Christian Angulo. From there, he continued shooting while running down the hallway toward the bathrooms. As the shots rang out, multiple staff members triggered the panic buttons on their ID badges, initiating a lockdown and notifying law enforcement. Some students initially mistook the shooting for a drill, even as gunfire would echo through the halls. One of the teachers who died that day was shot in the chest after stepping out of his classroom to see what was happening. His students quickly pulled him back inside and tried to stop the bleeding with their shirts, but they just couldn't save him. In another classroom, a student who was shot managed to shut the door, keeping Gray from getting inside, and then only afterward realized he was injured. The school went into lockdown at around 10:20 a.m., and law enforcement arrived by 10 to 23. The lockdown system caused all smartboards in the school to display hard lockdown in large red letters, a message that some students mistook for a drill. Luckily, within minutes of the first shots, school resource officers engaged Gray, and he surrendered without further resistance. Not long after, students were evacuated to the school's football field once the building was declared safe. In the chaos, some students recalled seeing police officers attempting to shield a body from view, along with a gun and blood at the scene. The situation was so dire that the governor of Georgia, Brian Kemp, directed all available state resources to assist in the end. Gray was arrested and charged with 55 counts, including 4 for murder, 4 for felony murder, 4 for aggravated battery, 25 for aggravated assault, and 18 for first-degree cruelty to children. Also, despite his young age, prosecutors announced plans to try him as an adult. So during the investigation, authorities would show that Gray had used a semi-auto AR-15 style rifle to carry out this shooting. Further inquiry would uncover some more troubling details, because Colin O'Gray had purchased that firearm for his son as a Christmas gift. The decision was made despite prior warnings from the FBI, which had flagged Gray's threatening messages on Discord, where he had spoken of a desire to commit a school shooting. And as a result of this, the families of the victims who were still grieving their loss didn't stop at seeking justice against Gray. Recognizing the role the father played in enabling that tragedy, they shifted focus toward Colin Gray. His actions, particularly the decision to arm his son despite clear warnings, were seen as critical factors that contributed to the devastating attack. October 2024, Colt's father faced multiple charges, such as involuntary manslaughter, second-degree murder, and cruelty to children. These are some of the most serious charges ever filed against a parent in a U.S. school shooting case. as they would point to a significant failure in allowing Colt to access a weapon despite his history of violent threats. Also, since Gray's parents are divorced, the father bore the entire responsibility for his role in providing the firearm. November 21st, 2024, Colin Gray waived his arraignment and pled not guilty to the 29 charges he faced. As the case continues, the victim's parents remain hopeful for justice. The shooting is currently regarded as the deadliest school shooting in Georgia's history, with the school remaining closed for nearly 3 weeks before reopening on September 24, 2024. I look at you sitting there right now, looking to what you should have looked through the entire trial, like a convicted murderer. In your prison outfit, shackled. Tonight, he's now been formally sentenced to 34 consecutive sentences of life in prison. February 14, 2018, Nicholas Cruz commits one of the deadliest high school shootings in U.S. history that left 17 dead and 17 injured. The gravity of this incident had the parents of the victims calling for his head, as they would stop at nothing to get their revenge. Born September 24, 1998, Nicholas Cruz was expelled from Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School due to disciplinary issues in 2017. As he exhibited a history of troubling behavior, he would be diagnosed with mental health conditions and was eligible for special education. As a result, Cruz was well known to school authorities and mental health professionals. In addition to that, his social media profiles would further show his alarming tendencies. He posted pictures of himself with weapons and would make violent threats. In fact, many calls were made to law enforcement about his behavior, including warnings that he might become a school shooter. In one case, this anonymous tip in 2016 would warn about Cruz's plans to buy a gun and hurt others. But this wasn't properly addressed then. February 2017, Cruz somehow legally purchases an AR-15 style rifle after passing a background check, despite all his warning signs. In fact, before that, he had bought several other firearms, including at least one shotgun and many other rifles, which he was seen firing for practice months before the shooting. Now, his ability to get those guns would expose some extreme flaws within the system, actually meant to stop troubled people from getting firearms. This was what the parents of the victims would later capitalize on to get their revenge, as you will come to see. February 14, 2018, Cruz, 19 years old at the time, arrived at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School. In an Uber, he carried a rifle case and a backpack filled with ammo. At around 2:19 p.m., just 20 minutes before school ended, he entered Building 12, which held about 900 students and across 3 floors. A campus monitor noticed Cruz and radioed a colleague about his suspicious movements toward the building. However, no lockdown was called because the protocols were unclear. This gave Cruz enough time to assemble his rifle in a stairwell. And as he's doing that, Cruz meets a student, Christopher McKenna, who told him to leave immediately, with a warning that something bad was about to happen. Although later McKenna did run to inform staff, by then Cruz had already started his attack. Cruz gets to the first floor hallway and opens fire, killing Martin Anguiano, Gina Montalto, and Luke Hoyer. He then targeted other classrooms, shooting through their doors and windows, killing 6 more students and wounding 13 others. Although teachers and staff attempted to shield students, Cruz came prepared. The fire alarm, triggered by gunfire, added to the chaos, leading students and staff to evacuate into the hallways where they became more vulnerable. And aside from that, many classrooms would lack designated hard corners for shelter, which further exposed those inside to danger. Cruz killed 2 staff members on the first floor before moving upstairs. On the second floor, Cruz fired into empty classrooms, continuing his spree of violence as he ascended to the 3rd floor. There he found kids stranded in the hallway and opened fire again, killing 5 more students and 1 staff member. 3 students and a teacher were also injured on this floor. In a final effort to maximize casualties, Cruz entered a teacher's lounge and attempted to shoot through hurricane-resistant windows at students and staff fleeing below. When the windows didn't shatter, Cruz abandoned his whole plan, dropped his weapon, and tried to blend in with the fleeing students to escape. This nightmare lasted about 6 minutes, leaving 14 students and 3 staff members dead after Cruz fired 139 shots. After the shooting, he would flee on foot, stopping at a nearby fast food restaurant. However, he'd be arrested about 80 minutes later in Coral Springs. His capture and confession confirmed his guilt, with further evidence, like surveillance and witness statements, supporting his actions. For the families of the victims, pursuing justice became their primary focus. October 20th, 2021, Cruz pled guilty to all charges and expressed remorse for his crimes. And while the prosecution sought the death penalty, a jury was unable to reach the unanimous decision required under Florida law. November 2nd, 2022, Cruz was given 34 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, one for each of the total number of victims murdered. However, he would also face additional charges for attacking an officer a few months after his arrest, which would include aggravated assault on an officer, battery against an officer, and misuse of an electric or chemical weapon. For that, he was given an extra 26 years in prison. Today, the wrong verdict was given. We are beyond disappointed with the outcome today. I'm stunned. I'm devastated. Many families view this outcome as insufficient, feeling it failed to match the gravity of his crimes. And so, their pursuit of accountability went beyond Cruz themselves, targeting the failures that allowed the tragedy to occur. First, the parents of Jamie Gutenberg and Alex Schachter, two of the victims, filed lawsuits against Smith & Wesson, the manufacturer of the rifle used in the attack, and Sunrise Tactical Supply, the retailer that sold the weapon. They would argue that these entities bore responsibility for enabling the foreseeable misuse of assault-style weapons. Survivors would file lawsuits against Broward County, the sheriff's office, and school officials, accusing them of negligence and failing to protect students. While a judge dismissed one lawsuit, citing a lack of legal duty to protect individuals from the shooter, the families would persist in seeking accountability through other legal avenues. By 2021, a landmark $25 million settlement was reached between the Broward County School District and the families of 52 victims. This would address allegations of negligence by the district, which critics argued failed to act on numerous warning signs about Cruz. Later that year, though, families also secured a settlement of $125 to $130 million from the federal government. Now, that agreement was tied to the FBI's admitted failure to follow up on a tip received a month before the shooting, which detailed Cruz's weapons cache, threats, and erratic behavior. The failure to act on that information represented another preventable lapse in the chain of events leading to the attack. The legal battles wouldn't stop here, though, because in 2024, Anthony Borges, a survivor who was severely injured in that shooting, reached a civil settlement with Cruz. Borges was granted control over Cruz's name, preventing him from profiting through interviews, films, or even books. Borges's legal team stated the objective was to strip Cruz of any power to harm his victims further, even from behind bars. The Parkland tragedy would result in legislative changes and activism. If you want to buy a gun in Florida now, you have to be 21, and they would implement other red flag laws, allowing authorities to temporarily confiscate weapons from individuals deemed a threat. The shooting also gave rise to the March of Our Lives movement, spearheaded by Parkland survivors advocating for stricter gun control measures nationwide. The Parkland school shooting remains one of the deadliest high school shootings in U.S. history. Now, interestingly, Cruz told a psychologist that he committed the shooting on Valentine's Day because he believed that no one loved him. Case 4. Born February 18, 1961, Mark Allen Rebbe was raised in a loving family in Florida, but he had a brief stint in the Army after high school, after which he got married 4 times and became a father of 5. Now behind the curtains, Rebbe was deep in crime, clever enough to stay off the police's radar until the 1990s, when his half-brother, Alex Wells, confessed during a prison Bible study group to participating in a murder. The confession brought Rebbe under scrutiny, and then also his involvement in more than a dozen cases of young women who went missing in Florida during the 80s and 90s. Rebbe was eventually convicted of the 1988 murder of Donna Callahan, a 29-year-old pregnant woman who disappeared from a convenience store in Gulf Breeze, Florida. Unfortunately, her body was never found. Rebbe's criminal activities often included abducting his victims from public places and disposing them in remote locations. Now, despite his imprisonment, Rebbe has continued to deny responsibility for most of the crimes attributed to him, leaving many cases unresolved and shrouded in mystery. Rebbe's involvement was confirmed through a confession he later retracted. Eventually, patterns in his criminal behavior and additional evidence linked him to Callahan's case. Retired FDLE Special Agent Dennis Haley, who's investigated Mark Rebbe for over 25 years, reported that Rebbe confessed to 12 additional murders after starting his 25 to life. Rebbe's family alerted Haley, who traveled 7 hours to hear that confession. However, Rebbe recanted, claiming his confessions were to help his son, and that he was coerced by law enforcement. Haley believes Rebbe committed at least 7 additional murders beyond his conviction, but Rebbe maintains his innocence in many cases, including Donna Callahan's murder. In this interview with Piers Morgan, let's just take a look at his arrogance and hostility. You can see his demeanor was marked by dismissive gestures, and he appeared to be visibly irritated. He would interrupt Piers, speak over him, and show little regard for the gravity of his alleged crimes. Now, Rebbe's body language was defensive. You can see him frequently cross his arms, leaning back in his chair, which signals his unwillingness to engage meaningfully. He would make sarcastic comments, completely mocking the interview process, and just showing a lack of remorse or empathy for his victims and their families. Throughout this interview, we can see a mix of manipulation and occasional flashes of anger, especially as Piers persistently threw questions aimed to break his facade, but Rebbe was largely uncooperative, denying involvement in numerous cases, while occasionally offering vague or contradictory statements. "Oh, you're lost, Nick. I was hitchhiking, running into trouble. I shoot the guy if I ran into trouble. I hate those male cops. Real bad. There's their dirtballs." Aileen Wuornos, the notorious damsel of the devil, confessed to the murder of 7 men, claiming the police knew she was killing and let her continue so they could profit from her story. Born February 29, 1956, in Rochester, Michigan, Wuornos' childhood was marked by abuse and neglect. Her father was convicted of sex crimes, and her mother would abandon her at 6 months old. She was sent to be raised by her alcoholic grandmother and cruel grandfather, who beat her regularly with his belt. Her father committed suicide in jail, where he was doing time for kidnapping and raping a child. So Wuornos would turn to prostitution in her teens, having a history with petty crime after she'd been at 13 and pregnant at 14. Kicked out at 15, Wuornos would begin turning tricks along Florida's interstate highways in a dangerous trade. Aileen began her killing spree in late 1989, targeting middle-aged men who allegedly tried to assault her. She killed 7 men, starting with Richard Mallory. Arrested in January 1991, she was linked to the crimes through fingerprints and pawned items. Her lover's cooperation led to her conviction. Wuornos had been disrespectful and hostile in her interviews, especially during her final years on death row. In this interview with Nick, she was visibly agitated, lashing out at the legal system, the media, and even Nick himself. "Oh, you're lost, Nick." She also expressed extreme paranoia, believing that the prison staff were torturing and trying to drive her insane before her execution. "I'm ready to go. Hey, I was tortured at BCI. They had the intercom on in the room, and they kept lying that it wasn't on." Now, if we look at her movements, they conveyed a deep frustration, making you feel like she was saying something, and no one was hearing or seeing her as the victim. Wuornos was eventually killed by lethal injection on October 9, 2002, at Florida State Prison. This violence that you have in you, the rage that you have in you, did you learn it, or were you born with it, do you reckon? One of Australia's most notorious criminals and infamous serial killers, Mark Brandon, developed a taste for violence at a disturbingly young age. Known for his fearsome tattoos and chilling tales of brutality, he would carry on this unsettling charisma that contrasted sharply with his often humorous yet menacing demeanor. His brutal exploits and larger-than-life personality had made him a criminal legend, but beneath his fearsome reputation lies a man shaped by a harsh and troubled life. Born November 17, 1954 in Melbourne, Victoria, Mark Brandon Reed, best known as Chopper, a nickname given to him before his criminal ventures from a childhood cartoon character, was raised by a war veteran father and a devout Seventh-day Adventist mother. He grew up in a rough working-class neighborhood, his family would struggle financially, and his father was often absent or abusive. Throughout his teens, he would be involved in petty crime and violence, setting the stage for his later career, but he was known for his temper and aggressive behavior, traits that would define his life as he became involved in more serious criminal activities. And at the age of 20, he'd already been in prison multiple times. He was notorious in Melbourne's underworld for his involvement in violent crimes, to the extent that he would chop off his own ears to leave a max security prison wing where he felt his life was in danger. Now his crimes would include armed robbery, drug trafficking, and extortion, but he would later get a reputation for targeting other criminals, rather than terrorizing the general public. This, however, totally gives a good mix of heroism and terror. He was never convicted for murder, though. In his interview with Tara Brown, Reed displayed a mix of arrogance, disrespect, and pride for his work of violence. Reed graphically described killing his victims from Desmond Costello in 1971, where he used his legs to suffocate him, and described it while he was laughing, to the extent it disturbed the interviewer, who asked why he found it amusing. On the other hand, Reed's recount of his experiences with Sid Collins in 2002 showed so much disrespect and disgust for the people he killed that he cursed Collins over and over, saying Collins was an idiot for trying to reconcile. And he claimed that he killed him with his own guy, remembering how the gun sounded while he shot him. He used the story to provoke and unsettle his audience, often laughing or making light of which really showcases his lack of respect for human life and the gravity of his actions. Now, he passed away on October 9, 2013, at the age of 58, after several health problems. Robert, however, rejected her, stating he had no interest in being a father to her 3 children, Christiane, Cheryl Lynn, and Danny. This interview has one of the most infamous serial killers in history. He's a cold-blooded psychopath who kills sporadically, often targeting women and children. His methods were pretty brutal, which included stabbings, beatings, and strangulation. He believes he belongs on death row, and claims he was raised to do time, and not to live out there in that world. Born June 28, 1964 in Oakland, California, his twin sister, Tammy Jean, died of meningitis when they were 18 months old, and after he'd be raised in a dysfunctional family, a very turbulent childhood involving neglect, illness, sexual abuse, and instability, which would worsen by his mother's interference in this attempted adoption by his aunt. By 8 years old, he began enduring sexual abuse from a family friend, further compounding his troubled childhood. He would drop out of school and start drinking and using drugs by the age of 10. By his teenage years, he'd be homeless, traveling across the U.S. by hitchhiking and hopping trains. His lifestyle made it difficult for authorities to track his movements and crimes. He would have his first murder occur at 16 years old, when he killed a man he found molesting a young boy. However, his verifiable killing spree would begin in the 80s. In 1985, he brutally murdered Ina Court and her son in Missouri. One of Cell's most notorious crimes occurred on December 31, 1999, when he broke into a home in Del Rio, Texas, sexually assaulting and murdering Kayleen Harris, and also attempted to kill 10-year-old Crystal Searles. Crystal would survive and provide crucial testimony that led to Cell's capture and conviction. Now, Sells was arrested on January 2, 2000, and later confessed to numerous murders across the country, though not all of his claims could be substantiated. Tommy's reaction to the questions during the interviews was marked by this unsettling mix of both arrogance and emotional detachment. All he was really talking about was how prisoners were treated in prison and what they didn't like about how they were treated. His demeanor was cold, and he often smirked when discussing his crimes or his thoughts, showing no empathy for his victims or their families. It's pretty disturbing how disrespectful he is. As he's being asked about his motivations and the brutality of his actions, Sells would often deflect or respond with some callous indifference, either threatening the interviewer or talking carelessly about the victim. This guy minimized the severity of his crimes and seemed to take pleasure in shucking his interviewer. Tommy Lynn Sells was sentenced to death and spent years on death row in Texas. On April 3, 2014, he was executed by lethal injection. He declined to make a final statement before his execution. And I wish you wouldn't use that term again while we're in a conversation. The phrase serial killer. Yeah, and America's worst. Right. Then I'll get up, I will leave. Right. Because I hate that. From 1977 to 93, a former trash company supervisor was found responsible for the murders of at least 10 women and girls, most of which constitutes. However, the majority of his victims were found before their death, shoeless and dumped in secluded spots around Kansas City, and would have cloth or paper towels stuffed into their mouths and ligature marks around their necks. This earned him the title Kansas City Strangler. Lorenzo Jerome Gilliard Jr., born in 1950 in Kansas City, Missouri, was known for his aggressive behavior from a very young age. He bullied smaller children and struggled academically, eventually dropping out of school. By the mid-1960s, he married Rena Hill after she became pregnant. Following the marriage, Lorenzo's behavior worsened as he got involved in crime and exhibited deviant behavior towards women. Between 1969 and 74, Lorenzo was suspected of 5 rapes and served time for children molestation, but was never convicted. Eventually, in 1987, DNA would link him to 13 victims, confirming his involvement in the murder of Sheila Ungold and others. He was tried on 7 first-degree murder charges and received life imprisonment without parole for 6 victims. He was acquitted of the evidence. The police had pursued Lorenzo for 15 years, trying to get him through blood samples they had gotten from victims. During his interview with Piers Morgan, Lorenzo wouldn't show any form of remorse or empathy. He would only get emotional when asked questions about his wife and his life outside of prison. He hated the fact that he was called a serial killer. However, his expressions were very dismissive and in denial. He would talk about these crimes like they were really nothing, and even threatening Piers over and over again that he was just going to get up and leave. Sometimes he was calm and composed, and others he would raise his voice like he was trying to control his anger. At one point in this interview, he was asked if he could pay a sex worker for sex, and his response was that a lady's being paid for sex all the time, whenever a man either buys her a drink, dinner, or anything, further saying that if the above-mentioned act doesn't lead to sex, then the man's gay. Lorenzo's crossed arms and minimal facial expressions would show defensiveness and detachment. His attitude suggested he was unrepentant and indifferent to his crime's impact on victims' families, and he would eventually fulfill his long-standing threat by leaving the interview, dropping his microphone by the door. A cobbler by trade, he led a life consumed by madness and crime, ultimately earning his place in the annals of American serial killers. Known for murdering 3 people and torturing 4 families, his heinous acts were made even more disturbing by the fact that he committed these crimes alongside his 13-year-old son Michael. Joseph's story is one of darkness, where the lines between fatherhood and cruelty were horrifyingly blurred. Born December 11, 1935, as Joseph Lee Brenner III at Northern Liberties Hospital in Philly, Pennsylvania, to Joseph Lee Brenner Jr. and his wife Judith. By December 1937, the child was placed in foster home after his father had abandoned his mother. In October of 1939, Stephen and Anna Collinger adopted him, but they severely abused the poor boy, and he also suffered a hernia inflicted by his foster father at the age of 6. He endured cruel punishment and was severely starved. And to top it off, when he was 9, he was sexually assaulted by a group of neighborhood boys. Now by mid-1974, he claimed that he kept hearing voices from a floating head that followed him around, claiming God instructed him to kill young boys and sever their pieces, which would lead him to murdering this Puerto Rican boy. The next victim would be one of his own children, Joe Jr., who had previously accused him of abuse. The youngster was found drowned in this abandoned building by Joseph Sr. and Michael. In July 1974, Joseph Collinger and his 13-year-old son Michael embarked on a crime spree across Philadelphia, Baltimore, and New Jersey. They robbed, assaulted, and sexually abused 4 families, murdering 3 people while posing as salesmen. On January 8, 1975, they killed a nurse, Maria Fashing, in Lounia, New Jersey. Police began looking into Collinger after finding physical evidence and eyewitness testimony linking him and his son to a crime scene. He was arrested for kidnapping and raped, and charged with 3 murders in New Jersey. Collinger pled insanity, but was given life in prison while his son was judged to be under his father's control and was sent to a reformatory. Due to Collinger's suicidal and violent behavior in prison, he was transferred to several mental hospitals. In this interview, Nacho Lance is the order of the day, while showing complete detachment as he described his actions in a matter-of-fact manner, showing no empathy for his victims. This guy notably said that he would keep killing if he got out. Collinger's statements revealed this disturbing awareness of his violent tendencies, as well as a firm belief that he couldn't be rehabilitated. His words would pierce through the minds of anybody listening. His demeanor would highlight the dangerous and unrepentant nature of his personality. Joseph Collinger died of an epileptic seizure on March 26, 1996. He spent the last 11 years of his life on watch. Gary Ridgway, the man known as the Green River Killer, became one of the most notorious serial killers in America's history after his first set of victims between 1982 and 84. And you just have to hear the way he describes his victims. Born February 18, 1949, growing up in a household in Salt Lake City, Utah, he would have a difficult relationship with his mother, which many experts believe contributed to his later violent behavior. But despite that, Ridgway seemed to live this ordinary life. He was married multiple times, held a steady job as a truck painter, and lived quietly in the Seattle area. However, it turned out Ridgway had a dark and disturbing obsession. Starting in the early 80s, he began targeting vulnerable young women, many of them workers or runaways. He would often pick them up on the Pacific Highway South, offering rides, and then luring them into isolated areas. Once alone, he would strangle them, usually with his bare hands, and dump their bodies near the Green River. For years, Ridgway evaded capture, even as bodies were being discovered along Green River and surrounding woods. The police launched a massive investigation, but without any advanced forensic techniques like have today, they kind of struggled. Ridgway even passed a polygraph test, really adding to the difficulty of the ongoing investigation. So it wasn't until 2001, with the advancements in DNA technology, that Ridgway was finally caught. DNA samples from many victims were matched to Ridgway, which led to his eventual arrest. In a deal to avoid the death penalty, he ultimately confessed to killing 71 women, although some believe that number could be higher. On December 18, 2003, he was sentenced to 48 life sentences, without the possibility of parole, to be served consecutively. And then they gave him an additional 10 years for tampering with evidence for each of the victims, adding 480 years to his 48 life sentences. So in January 2004, Gary was placed in solitary confinement in Washington State Penitentiary. After this brief transfer to USP Florence High in 2015, public outcry led to his return to Washington that October, ensuring he remained accessible for ongoing murder investigations. During his interviews, he showed detachment, often lacking empathy or remorse. The manner in which he spoke about his crimes was deeply unsettling and disrespectful, especially considering all the pain he had caused to all those families. This guy's lack of emotion and his blunt descriptions of how he chose, murdered, and disposed of his victims just made it clear that he saw his victims as objects, rather than human beings. Do you recall any conversation with her, Gary? Where she'd come from? What her name was? Did she tell you her first name or a street name? No. This twisted detachment from reality was a blatant disrespect to the memory of his victims and their loved ones. The woman you killed was Karen Hodila, a 44-year-old woman who you'd never met. Why did you kill her? It just felt like it. October 10, 2002. After a series of arguments over stolen medication, William Clyde Gibson brutally killed 44-year-old Karen Sue Hodila. This was just one of the 3 known murders carried out by Gibson. Born in 1957, William Clyde Gibson III was the youngest of 4 kids in Raleigh, North Carolina. His family would move to New Albany, Indiana, where he eventually grew up. Though Gibson claimed that he wasn't abused, his father was still an alcoholic. He had some social anxiety and tended to being bullied, which in turn made him a bully himself. Dropping out of school, he turned to small-time crimes. But then he joined the army and developed addictions to drugs and alcohol, which would lead him to a dishonorable discharge for stealing, and was imprisoned after, which he later attempted to while imprisoned. Upon his release, though, he got married, but infertility issues worsened his substance abuse, leading to more problems. In 2012, Gibson was arrested after the brutal murder of Christine Whitus, a 75-year-old family friend. Her body was found in Gibson's garage, and during the investigation, authorities uncovered evidence linking him to 2 other murders. Stephanie Kirk, a 35-year-old woman whose body was found buried in his backyard, and Karen Hodela, a 44-year-old woman killed nearly a decade earlier, in 2002. What set Gibson's apart was not only the brutality of his crimes, but his disturbing behavior after the fact. It was said he kept the body parts of his victims as macabre souvenirs for his sexual gratification. When police arrested him, they found a scarred bosom from one of his victims in the glove compartment of a van. Oh, this level of depravity painted a terrifying portrait of a man who reveled in his gruesome acts. We see in his trial that he was a deeply disturbed individual with no remorse for his actions. He was convicted for the murders of Whitus, Kirk, and Hodela, and was sentenced to death. In addition to that death sentence, he also received 2 life sentences, plus an additional 65 years. Now, from the trial, we could see his lack of empathy, but we get another taste in his interview while on death row. It was in this interview that we could see the mindset that led him to commit the gruesome murders. So the most disrespectful part here would have to be after he was asked for his reason for killing his first victim. Here, he bluntly said, "Just felt like it," after which he laughed in utter disregard. The rest of the interview would show a lack of humanity, in general, as he could easily kill someone now and have dinner the next minute. Lost at all about any of the people you murdered? It just don't seem to affect me. Today, we find Gibson on Indiana's death row, a symbol of unrepentant evil. His case will be a stark reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath a seemingly ordinary exterior. Serial killers do on a small scale what governments do on the large one. They are a product of the times, and these are bloodthirsty times. Even psychopaths have emotions if you dig deep enough. April 10, 1984. Ramirez murdered Mei Liang, a Chinese-American girl, in the basement of his apartment building in the Tenderloin district of San Francisco. Now, this was just one of many motivated killings he carried out as he terrorized California during the mid-1980s. Born February 29, 1960, in El Paso, Texas, Ramirez's childhood would be marked with abuse, a violent father, and exposure to disturbing influences, which would include his cousin, a Vietnam veteran who shared gruesome stories of torture and murder, and these early experiences profoundly shaped Ramirez's violent tendencies. He would move to California as a teenager, where his criminal activities would start with petty theft and drug use, eventually escalating to more serious stuff. Between 1984 and 85, Ramirez went on this horrific killing spree across LA and San Francisco, committing a series of brutal home invasions, assaults, and murders. You could characterize his crimes by extreme violence, satanic rituals, and a complete disregard for human life. Ramirez would target his victims indiscriminately, regardless of age, gender, or ethnicity, which really heightened the terror amongst the public. This guy would leave satanic symbols at crime scenes, further fueling his notoriety. The media dubbed him the Night Stalker because he was attacking everybody at night. Now, Ramirez's reign of terror ended on August 31, 1985, when he was captured by a group of citizens in East LA. After being recognized from a police sketch, he was convicted of 13 murders, 5 attempted murders, 11 sexual assaults, and 14 burglaries. During his trial, his lack of remorse and chilling courtroom antics, including flashing a pentagram tattoo, solidified his image as a remorseless killer. In his interviews, the Night Stalker would display chilling arrogance and the utmost disrespect. He would show no remorse for his heinous crimes, speaking with a smug and condescending attitude. This guy would glorify his actions, expressing admiration for the evil and satanic imagery he embraced. You could see him feel a sense of superiority as he relished in the fear he instilled in others. Ramirez's cold, detached manner and that arrogant smirk in his interview showed a guy who reveled in pain and terror with no regard for his victims or their suffering. Even psychopaths have emotions if you dig deep enough, but then again, maybe they don't. Do you have emotions, Richard? No comment. To emphasize his disrespectful attitude, his answers to every question were very well scripted. He never sincerely said anything except when he wanted to nag about something, or just be a D*******. Do you admit to being evil, Richard? We are all evil in some form or another. The guy possibly could have had a god complex. In 1989, Ramirez was eventually sentenced to death and remained on death row at San Quentin State Prison until his death from complications related to B-cell lymphoma on June 7, 2013. There's a lasting scar on the victims' families and the communities he terrorized. I'm definitely incompetent. That's not what I said. Well, I say that. There's nothing wrong with being incompetent because you don't have to do as much. If you're competent, then you got a lot to do. The infamous cult leader and orchestrator of the Manson family would captivate and horrify with his charismatic yet deranged conduct. This guy's known for unsettling smirks, intense eye contact, and provocative outbursts. Manson's interviews were a chilling showcase of his manipulative and chaotic personality. Born back on November 12, 1934 in Cincinnati, Ohio, Manson would get into crime from a very early age. By the late 1960s, he gathered a following of disaffected young people in California who believed in his apocalyptic visions and saw him as an admirable messianic figure. On August 8th and 9th, 1969, the most infamous of the family's crimes would occur under Manson's direction. His followers brutally murdered actress Sharon Tate, who was 8 months pregnant at the time, and 4 others at her Beverly Hills home. J.C. Bring, Abigail Folger, Wojciech Frykowski, and Stephen Perrin. The following night, the group killed Leno and Rosemary LaBianca, a wealthy couple living in L.A. These victims were stabbed multiple times, and messages like Helter Skelter were written in blood on the walls, a reference to Manson's twisted interpretation of the Beatles' song. Now, Manson's motive was to incite a race war, which he referred to as Helter Skelter. He believed that the murders would be blamed on African Americans and spark a violent racial conflict. Manson didn't directly participate in these killings, but orchestrated them and manipulated his followers to carry them out. By 1971, Manson and his followers were convicted of murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Manson received a death sentence, later commuted to life in prison when California temporarily abolished the death penalty. Charlie Manson would often exhibit disrespectful and provocative behavior during his interviews. This guy was known for his defiant stance, where he would sit with a confrontational posture, leaning forward to assert his dominance and combative demeanor, flashing unsettling smirks and grins, showing a disturbing sense of superiority and amusement at the discomfort he caused. He would use his whole body and his hands to drive his point, to intimidate, to challenge and mock his interviewers and the world. This is seen in his interview with Heidi Schulman, dismissing her questions with sarcasm and maintaining an aggressive posture, describing how he could use his book to beat her to death, leaning forward, glaring intensely, piercing his eye into the mind of the interviewer. One could literally feel chills run down their spine. He's seen creating an unsettling atmosphere and attempting to exert psychological control over his interviewer, often interrupting her and saying some crazy stuff. He believes totally in his own mind that he's not guilty. You guys got this stuck in your head that I've murdered somebody. You've got it stuck in your brain that I murdered somebody. What do you want to call me a murderer for? I've never killed anyone. I don't need to kill anyone. I have it here. This whole show was deliberately meant to challenge authority and manipulate the perception of those interviewing him. However, he remained in prison until his death, which was from natural causes at the age of 83. Case 5. The story of an ordinary American student and popular blogger named Jenna Burley in 2017 shocked the entire country. Initially, thousands of people participated in the search for the missing girl, hoping she was alive. But when the terrifying truth was revealed, no one could believe what had happened. The girl had simply gone to celebrate her friend's birthday, but this party turned out to be the last night of her life. A tragic mix-up, intoxication, and the naive desire to trust a charming stranger who, coincidentally, offered his help led to the tragedy. Who is Jenna Burley? Jenna Nicole Burley was born on November 4, 1994, in the capital of Pennsylvania, the city of Harrisburg. As the second of 4 children to Edward and Jacqueline Burley, her parents met in the late 80s while attending university in Philadelphia, where mutual feelings quickly blossomed, and they never parted after that. The couple married in the fall of 1991, and in 1992 their first child was born, a daughter named Janelle. 2 years later, the heroine of our story was born, and soon after, their sons, Jeffrey and Jacob, followed one after the other. The Burleys dedicated themselves to helping others. Jacqueline worked in a nursing home, and Edward was employed at a hospital, specializing in patient rehabilitation after injuries and illnesses. The couple raised their children in an atmosphere of love and mutual understanding, striving to give them the best. Jenna was always very close to her parents, as well as her brothers and sister. She grew up as an active, positive, and energetic girl with creative streak, strong charisma, and leadership qualities. She always had plenty of friends, performed well in school, acted in the school theater from a young age, and adored animals. The Burley family was neither wealthy nor struggling. They settled in Philadelphia, in a spacious house located in the quiet, cozy neighborhood of Harleysville. Jenna easily integrated into any group, quickly made friends, and became the life of the party. In high school, the girl dreamed of becoming a fashion designer, constantly experimenting with looks and styles, sometimes appearing quite extravagant. Jenna wore bright makeup, dyed her hair in various colors, and dressed in different styles, sometimes resembling a hippie, other times an adherent of the emo subculture. She loved standing out from the crowd, and encouraged her friends to challenge the mundane routine as well. The teenage girl frequently attended concerts, festivals, and other mass events that served as sources of inspiration for her. As she neared the end of high school, Burley's views and interests began to shift. Now, she dreamed of a career in film rather than fashion design. She learned to create short films during classes at a local film studio, where her talent was already evident, as she approached each storyline and creation process with creativity. At that time, Jenna also registered on several social networks, where she actively maintained her pages, sharing her life, interests, and philosophical reflections on various pressing social issues. Very quickly, the high school senior gained a large following, and her audience grew rapidly. People seemed to enjoy following this vibrant, creative girl who constantly experimented with her appearance and encouraged others to embrace self-expression. Before she knew it, Jenna had become a rather popular blogger with an audience of several thousand followers. In 2013, the 18-year-old high school graduate enrolled in a prestigious college in sunny Florida, where she studied media arts and filmmaking. While studying, the student continued to actively maintain and develop her blog, sharing stories about campus life, the subjects she was studying, her community involvement, as well as parties and other entertainment with friends. Serious injury and prolonged depression on December 20th, 2013, after completing just one semester of college, Jenna came home to celebrate Christmas with her family. At that time, Philadelphia had already seen snow, and the weather was quite harsh. Jenna didn't consider the sharp contrast from Florida and wore completely inappropriate shoes, which caused her to slip and fall, seriously injuring her ankle before even reaching the house. An X-ray revealed a double fracture with displacement, requiring surgery, along with the insertion of special pins and plates. For several months, Burley was literally confined to a wheelchair, as she couldn't put any weight on her foot. She then had to relearn how to walk and attended daily physiotherapy sessions. During this period, she also managed to catch pneumonia, significantly complicating and prolonging her recovery. The student was forced to take an academic leave to focus on restoring her health, which greatly upset her. The only solace she found was in her personal blog, where she published excerpts from her journal entries and thoughts, and in social media, where Jenna actively communicated with her followers. Jenna posted new videos almost daily, answering questions and discussing various topics. A passionate animal rights activist, she spoke out against zoos, dolphinariums, and other places where animals are kept in captivity and exploited for entertainment. She also highlighted the difficult plight of the homeless, noting that in states with warm and mild climates, they have it much easier than in Pennsylvania, where those without a roof over their heads risk freezing to death on the streets. In addition, Jenna, who had already been engaged in regular charity work, began organizing fundraising efforts to donate essential items to animal shelters and homeless shelters. During her rehabilitation, Jenna took up making handmade jewelry, which she sold online, donating all the proceeds to those in need. She actively encouraged her followers to donate unwanted items to charity, emphasizing that what might seem like trash cluttering a closet to some could be a real treasure for someone less fortunate. The recovery period dragged on, and Jenna ended up spending almost a year at home instead of just a few months. During this time, she adopted a dog from a local shelter whom she absolutely adored, and she mentioned her pet daily in her blog, sharing stories of how they spent their days together. But despite her seemingly optimistic outlook, Jenna fell into a deep depression. In the fall of 2014, she candidly admitted that she could no longer cope on her own, and had to seek professional help from a psychiatrist. Burley spoke openly about the mental health challenges she faced, sharing her doctor's recommendations and discussing how her family and pet supported her. The blogger's audience grew several times during this period, as many young people related to the struggles she described and thanked her for her honesty. In early 2015, Jenna, along with her father and younger brother Jacob, went on a trip to sunny California. Jenna felt much better, as she wrote in her social media posts, and the happy photos from the ocean shore clearly showed the strong bond she had with her family. The eternal student. After fully recovering and taking the trip with her family, Jenna decided not to return to Florida, but instead transferred to a school in her hometown, choosing to live at her parents' house. She enrolled at Montgomery County Community College, a suburb of Philadelphia. Meanwhile, Burley continued to maintain her blog and produced short videos on various topics. In 2017, after earning a bachelor's degree in the humanities, Jenna decided to enroll in a university and became a student at Temple University's School of Film. Since the campus was only a half-hour drive away, Jenna chose not to move into a dormitory, but to stay at her family home. By that time, she had renovated her room and acquired her own car, so she didn't need to rely on family members for rides to class. At the time she entered the university, Jenna was already 22 years old, making her 4 to 5 years older than her classmates. Nevertheless, they were on the same wavelength, hanging out, having fun, attending concerts, and celebrating each other's birthdays. It's worth noting that Temple University is located almost in the center of the city and is one of the largest higher education institutions in the country. The campus is surrounded by numerous shops, shopping centers, restaurants, pubs, and other venues, so life here is bustling, you could say, 24/7. Students always have a place to relax and unwind after classes. Classes began at the end of August, and just a few days later, Jenna got into a car accident on her way to school. Fortunately, she was wearing her seatbelt and wasn't injured, but her car was seriously damaged. From then on, her father or one of her younger brothers usually drove her to school in the mornings. Occasionally, Jenna would stay overnight at friends' houses if she stayed in the city late, always informing her parents beforehand. Fatal mix-up at the party on Wednesday, August 30th, 2017, Jenna's classmate and close friend, named Davis, was planning to celebrate his birthday at one of the bars. Jenna was among those invited to the party and was supposed to stay overnight at the birthday boy's place so they could head to class together on Thursday morning. She informed her parents in advance so they wouldn't worry. That evening, Jenna, Davis, and 5 other friends had a great time taking photos and posting them on social media. They hopped from bar to bar, meeting other friends along the way who joined their group, congratulating the birthday boy and toasting to his health. By around 11 p.m., the group had changed significantly, and everyone was pretty tipsy. Around midnight, the friends found themselves in a small sports bar that was packed with people. The birthday boy had stepped away because his friends had arranged a surprise for him, kidnapping him and taking him to another venue. He informed Burley about this and asked her to text him what time she would arrive at his apartment to spend the night. Jenna stayed in the bar with the rest of the group. Several people who were sober and driving offered Jenna a ride wherever she wanted to go, and a few classmates invited her to stay over at their place. But Jenna said she had already made plans with Davis and would go to his place. However, by around 1 a.m., friends began to leave, and Burley didn't notice that everyone who had offered her a place to stay or a ride had simply disappeared. A mix-up occurred, leading to tragic consequences. Jenna believed until the last moment that she would leave with someone from the bar, and she said goodbye to her friends, assuring them that she would stay a little longer. When she finally realized what was happening, she was sitting at the bar next to a group of strangers who soon left as well. The bar was closing at 2 a.m., and Jenna, realizing she was all alone, started texting Davis, asking him to come pick her up. However, the guy had fallen asleep at home, and his phone was in another room, so he didn't hear anything. Jenna tried to contact a few other friends, but they were either too drunk to respond or didn't hear their phones. She didn't want to bother her parents, and walking through the city alone at night didn't seem safe. The disappearance of the student when Davis woke up in the morning, he thought Jenna had stayed over at someone else's place, but after checking his phone, he became seriously concerned. Jenna had tried to call him twice, and sent several messages asking if he could pick her up from the bar, with the last message containing only 2 words, "Help me." He tried to call her back, but her phone was turned off. He still hoped that his friend was okay and would show up at class as usual, but Burley never appeared at the university. Davis called and visited all the friends who had partied with them at the bar the night before, but none of them had hosted the student. In the afternoon, one of Jenna's friends called her parents to ask if she had returned home. When they responded no, she explained what had happened, and within half an hour, Edward and Jacqueline rushed to the campus. They spoke with their daughter's friends, trying to find out who had seen her last and where. After getting no useful information, the Burleys immediately went to the police to report their daughter missing, insisting on an immediate search operation. The urgency of the situation was heightened by the messages asking for help that Jenna had sent to several classmates. The first places checked were the academic buildings and dormitories, but there was no sign of the missing student. The police then contacted local hospitals, but no women matching Jenna's description had been admitted in the past 24 hours. Everyone who had interacted with her the previous night confirmed that the last time they saw the student was at the sports bar. She was wearing blue jeans, a white t-shirt with a motivational slogan on the front, and a light blue hoodie tied around her waist. Another distinguishing feature was her hairstyle, long black hair braided into 2 pigtails. Since Burley was a fairly popular blogger, news of her disappearance quickly spread across social media. Thousands of her followers posted messages asking for help in finding her and urged anyone with information to come forward. The generous and persistent stranger, when the police arrived at the bar where the missing student was last seen, the bartender immediately remembered the girl with the braids who stayed late after everyone else had left. She was quite drunk, seemed confused, and was constantly texting and calling someone. The signal from her phone was last detected in the same neighborhood around 2 a.m. Surveillance footage from the cameras at the entrance and inside the bar was reviewed. The detectives saw Jenna sitting alone at the bar, drinking a cocktail and sending messages. Around 1:30 a.m., a man approached her, started a conversation, and then bought her a drink. They sat together for about 20 minutes before leaving the bar just before it closed. They both appeared to be quite intoxicated as they were walking unsteadily. When the bartender was shown the footage and asked if he knew the man, he immediately recognized a regular customer and even named him Joshua Hupperders. According to the bartender, Joshua was almost a daily visitor, and the night before he seemed particularly interested in the lonely beauty, buying her cocktails and persistently inviting her to his place. The authorities discovered that Joshua had recently turned 29, had once attended Temple University, but never graduated, having taken an extended academic leave. Despite this, he constantly hung out with students and lived just 5 minutes away from the bar where he was seen with Jenna. He rented a spacious apartment in a building across the street, which he shared with his friend, Jack Miley. It wasn't until later in the evening that they managed to reach Joshua, who claimed he had been very drunk the night before and didn't remember anything about a girl from the bar. He agreed to come in for questioning, but soon after, his phone was turned off, prompting the police to visit Hupperders' apartment themselves. The main suspect. Only Jack was home, and he let the detectives in without any fuss. The guy's apartment looked like a typical bachelor pad, with disorder reigning in nearly every room. Jack admitted that he and his friend had indeed gone to the sports bar the night before, where they drank heavily. Afterward, Joshua picked up some girl, and Jack decided to head home to give them privacy. Jack claimed he went straight to bed and didn't hear when his roommate came home, or if he was alone. The next day, Joshua suddenly started cleaning the kitchen. He seemed worried, had fresh scratches on his face, and a deep cut on his hand. Joshua explained this as an unfortunate accident, saying he had fallen into some bushes while drunk. After lunch, he disappeared, taking some of his belongings with him, without telling his friend where he was going or how long he'd be gone, and his phone was turned off. The large apartment the guys lived in had a second exit leading to the backyard, where there were no surveillance cameras. Near the door, a pair of men's sandals with strange brownish stains were found, and on a dresser lay a roll of paper towels stained with something that looked like blood. There was also a strong smell of cleaning chemicals in the kitchen, and several empty bottles of cleaning products were scattered on the floor. All of this raised alarming suspicions, and from that point on, Joshua was considered the main suspect in the case of the missing student. The police decided to dig deeper into Hupperders' background and discovered that he was born and raised in Philadelphia, lost his father at an early age, who had been violently deprived of life, and this event had been traumatic for the child. Joshua enrolled at Temple University but never graduated, remaining a student until he was 29. He had a history of legal issues related to the distribution of prohibited substances which he sold to students. Additionally, he had served several months for burglary and had been charged multiple times for assaults on women in attempts to coerce them into intimacy. The search and first interrogation of the fugitive it became clear that the suspect could be extremely dangerous, and there was still no information about the fate of the missing girl. The FBI joined the investigation, and soon it was determined that Joshua's phone had last been active in Wayne County, about 230 miles north of Philadelphia, near a lake. It was discovered that the fugitive's grandmother lived in that area, and he might be hiding at her house. Hupperders was indeed apprehended at his maternal grandmother's house. He appeared calm and didn't resist. He maintained that he didn't remember anything about the night of August 31st because he was drunk, and when asked about the fresh wounds on his body, he repeated the same story about falling into bushes that he had told his roommate Jack. He explained his sudden departure as wanting to spend the last weekend before the start of classes with family. When the police pointed out that they knew he wasn't enrolled in any university, he fell silent and demanded a lawyer. Meanwhile, experts working at the fugitive's apartment in Philadelphia found traces of blood on the floor, plumbing, and in the trash can. They were waiting for the test results to determine whose blood it was, and the hope of finding the missing girl alive was fading with each passing minute. During the search of Joshua's room, several bags of various prohibited substances were found, along with about $20,000 in cash. The mysterious container detectives continued to search Hupperders' residence, including the backyard accessible through the second door. In the corner trash bins, which fortunately had not yet been emptied, A black bag was found containing a light blue hoodie and a t-shirt with slogans, along with a sports bra and a black hair tie with a few dark strands of hair. The clothing found in the trash closely resembled what Jenna was wearing on the day she disappeared. To make matters worse, there were blood stains on the items, making the chances of finding the girl alive seem almost non-existent. Nevertheless, the search continued, and the suspect remained silent. On September 2nd, Hupperter's stepfather unexpectedly called the police, reporting that on August 31st, the man had visited his mother's house in Jenkintown. He had arrived by taxi, carrying a large, opaque plastic container that was very heavy. Joshua explained that it contained his books and some personal belongings. He left the container in the garage and left early the next morning, taking another taxi. The stepfather found this suspicious, as the container was unusually heavy and gave off a strange feeling. Knowing his stepson's criminal past, the elderly man decided to inform the police without telling his wife. He didn't know where Joshua went afterward, but heard him asking the driver not to log the trip in the app, promising to pay in cash. The grisly discovery in the shed. By the time the stepfather called, Hupperter's had already been apprehended, and a search of his grandmother's house had yielded no suspicious findings. The fate of the mysterious plastic container remained unknown, and the authorities suspected it might have been sunk in a lake. They considered involving divers in the search, but the case took an unexpected turn. It turned out that Joshua's grandmother's husband had a small shed located a significant distance from the house, nearly hidden by overgrown bushes and trees. The man stored an old boat and fishing gear there, though he hadn't used them in a long time. On September 3rd, he decided to check the shed and noticed the lock on the door was broken. Suspecting thieves, he entered but found everything in its place, except for a strange container that hadn't been there before. He opened the container and recoiled in horror. Inside was the severely mutilated naked body of a young woman. He immediately called the police to the gruesome discovery. The authorities quickly realized whose remains the pensioner had found in his shed and called in Burley's parents for identification. Jenna's mother fainted, and her father nearly had a heart attack when their worst fears were confirmed. The crime scene, through witness testimony and surveillance footage, investigators established that Hupperter's had plied the already intoxicated girl with more alcohol and then lured her to his home. When Jenna realized she was trapped, she managed to send several friends messages asking for help, but none responded. At the apartment, Joshua attacked the girl and tried to force her into intimacy, but she fought back fiercely, scratching the criminal and cutting his hand with a kitchen knife. However, he managed to knock the knife out of her hand and repeatedly slammed her head against the floor. He incapacitated Jenna and took advantage of her before strangling the poor girl with his bare hands. He then placed her body in a container he found in the storage room and cleaned up the crime scene as best he could. The autopsy revealed that Jenna died from mechanical asphyxiation. Her body showed numerous abrasions, bruises, and even bite marks. She also had a traumatic brain injury and signs of intimate assault. The blood found on the shoes and paper towels in the apartment was hers. Her hair was on the hair tie in the trash can, and the blood and semen found on her clothing matched the defendant's. The trial and sentencing Hupperter's refused to take a plea deal or admit guilt, even though his culpability was never in doubt. Furthermore, a search of his grandmother's house revealed a backpack containing his documents, cash, and a few essentials indicating that the criminal had intended to flee and was caught just in time. The trial of the criminal and assailant began only in the spring of 2019, a year and a half after the horrific crime. The defense attorneys desperately tried to shift all the blame onto the deceased girl, claiming that she had voluntarily come to Joshua's apartment and provoked him. However, the defense's statements sparked outrage among everyone present. After 9 days of hearings, the defendant was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to life imprisonment, with the possibility of parole only after 60 years. Case 6. It was a quiet morning on February 24, 2023, until chaos broke out in the Bamfield home. Shouts and screams echoed from the upstairs bedroom, followed by the sound of gunshots. When police arrived, they found a scene that didn't quite make sense. 2 bodies, a knife, and a story that felt off. What really happened that day? How did things spiral so out of control? As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered shocking secrets that turned this into a story of betrayal, conspiracy, and murder. In 2003, at the age of 18, Christine enrolled at Quinnipiac University in Connecticut to pursue a degree in nursing. In 2004, during her first year of college, she met Brendan Robert Bamfield, and before long the two started dating. Christine graduated in 2007, and the following year, in 2008, Brendan proposed to her. Their engagement lasted nearly 2 years, culminating in their marriage on June 12, 2010. Christine was a devoted nurse who loved her job, often working grueling 16-hour night shifts. Despite the exhausting schedule, she found fulfillment in her work. On social media, she occasionally shared her fitness journey at a local gym, where Brendan would sometimes join her. Friends of the couple noted how Brendan was always supportive, encouraging Christine in her workouts and complimenting her progress. Christine once posted about how happy she felt when Brendan motivated her, especially after he noticed the positive changes her healthy routine brought to her life. Brendan, on the other hand, was more reserved online, rarely sharing personal details. He worked as a federal agent in the tax department, investigating fraud and tax evasion cases. Together, Christine and Brendan built a life that reflected their shared efforts and deep connection. They enjoyed attending football games, hosting parties, taking vacations, and traveling abroad. They were the picture of a typical American couple, meeting young and dreaming of a bright future together. The couple initially lived in New York before relocating to Herndon, Virginia. Their home, valued at over $1 million, was in one of the city's most desirable neighborhoods. Financially stable, both enjoyed excellent salaries and a comfortable lifestyle. Their jobs sometimes required travel, which meant they were occasionally apart for work. In one social media post, Christine mentioned having to leave their dog at a pet hotel because both she and Brendan were traveling for work simultaneously. In October 2017, Christine, then 32, announced on social media that she was 3 months pregnant. On March 30th, 2018, she gave birth to a baby girl. From then on, Christine's social media posts reflected her joy as a mother, sharing pictures of her family. In 2019, the Banfields decided to join the Culture Care Au Pair program. For those unfamiliar, the program facilitates cultural exchange, allowing au pairs to live with families abroad, care for their children, and study, all while receiving accommodation, meals, and a stipend. In April 2019, Amanda, a young Brazilian woman, joined the family through the au pair program. Over the next 2 years, Amanda developed a close bond with the family. She shared photos of their trips, celebrations, and everyday life, showing a strong relationship with the Banfields. Christine even referred to Amanda as part of the family. Amanda's time with the Banfields ended in 2021, but she extended her stay for 6 months due to global travel restrictions. Encouraged by their positive experience, the Banfields sought another au pair, specifically someone Brazilian. They met Juliana Perez Magalhães, a 23-year-old nurse from Sao Paulo, Brazil. Juliana arrived in late 2021 after completing the au pair application process. Like Amanda, Juliana developed a good relationship with the family. While not as close as Amanda had been, her connection with the Banfields seemed strong enough for them to extend her stay for another year. However, everything changed on February 24, 2023. At approximately 7:50 a.m., a brief 911 call was made from Juliana's phone, but ended abruptly. 13 minutes later, another call came through, during which Juliana reported that a friend was injured. Moments later, Brendan took the phone and told the dispatcher he had found his wife, Christine, with stab wounds in their upstairs bedroom and had shot a man named Ryan. Police arrived within 10 minutes to find Ryan deceased and Christine gravely injured in the upstairs bedroom. Christine was rushed to a nearby hospital after the incident. Fortunately, the couple's 4-year-old daughter, who was in the house at the time, was unharmed. However, Christine succumbed to her injuries and passed away shortly after arriving at the hospital. Brendan was also hospitalized due to a leg injury. Preliminary reports from the police revealed that the deceased man found at the scene was Joseph Ryan, a 38-year-old. According to the initial investigation, Ryan allegedly broke into the Banfield home, attacked Christine with a knife, and was fatally shot by Brendan shortly thereafter. This was all the information made available at the time. After being discharged from the hospital, Brendan refused to speak with the detectives or the media about the events that had unfolded. Juliana, on the other hand, cooperated fully. She provided her account to the police, signing a formal statement. Juliana claimed that on the morning of the incident, she had arrived at the Banfield residence for work and witnessed Joseph Ryan forcefully entering the home. Panicked, she called Brendan, who was not home at the time, and asked for help. Brendan reportedly advised her to stay calm and assured her he would be there within minutes. Juliana stated that she waited outside the house for her safety until Brendan arrived. Once he got there, the two entered the home together and found Christine gravely injured. They also came face to face with Joseph Ryan, who was still inside. According to her account, a physical altercation ensued between Brendan and Ryan, during which Brendan managed to grab a firearm kept in the house and fired multiple shots at Ryan, killing him. Brendan later corroborated Juliana's account, claiming he acted in self-defense. However, one puzzling detail emerged from Juliana's statement. She mentioned arriving at the Banfield home early that morning to start her work. This raised questions, as au pairs typically reside in the homes of their host families. It remained unclear where Juliana had been before arriving at the house. For months, the police withheld information about the investigation, opting to keep their findings confidential. Meanwhile, neighbors reported seeing Juliana at the Banfield residence frequently. Though it was uncertain whether she was still living there, she was often seen with the couple's daughter, leading to speculation that she might still be working as her nanny. By August 2023, Juliana posted on social media that she was looking for a nanny position in the area. Given that au pairs are not allowed to seek additional employment while participating in the program, this suggested that Juliana was no longer part of the program at that point. After more than 7 months of investigation, law enforcement pieced together key evidence and forensic data to shed light on the case. According to Juliana's own statements to her family in Brazil, the police concluded that Joseph Ryan had killed Christine due to a disagreement, as the two had allegedly been in a relationship. However, the case took a shocking turn on October 19, 2023, when Juliana was arrested. She was taken by surprise as the police charged her with second-degree murder, alleging that it was she, not Brendan, who had fired the fatal shots at Joseph Ryan. Investigators also concluded that Brendan had not been home at the time of the shooting, contradicting their earlier statements. Juliana was subsequently taken to the Fairfax County Detention Center. Initially, the public rallied behind Juliana, hailing her as a hero who acted in defense of the family that had welcomed her into their home. Many sympathized with Brendan as well, believing he had lied to protect Juliana, knowing her temporary visa status could jeopardize her future in the country. However, police later revealed that there were no signs of forced entry at the Banfield residence, suggesting that Joseph Ryan may have been let in willingly, potentially by Christine herself. Questions also arose about whether Juliana had known Joseph Ryan prior to the incident. These revelations shifted public opinion dramatically. Supporters began to doubt Juliana's version of events as theories circulated online. The most popular theory suggested that Juliana and Brendan had been romantically involved and had orchestrated the incident to eliminate Christine. Speculation grew that a divorce would have forced Brendan to split his assets with Christine, so he and Juliana allegedly staged an attack using Joseph Ryan as a scapegoat. Another theory proposed that Brendan and Juliana had been traveling together on the day of the incident and returned home to find Christine and Joseph confronting them. In this scenario, Joseph was believed to be a private investigator hired by Christine to confirm her suspicions about an affair. A violent altercation ensued, resulting in Christine and Joseph's deaths. A third theory speculated that Christine and Joseph had been romantically involved and that Brendan, upon discovering them together, killed them both in a fit of rage. Juliana, loyal to Brendan, allegedly covered for him, and the two began a relationship afterward. During her first court hearing, Juliana testified that on the morning of the incident, Christine had given her and the 4-year-old daughter tickets to the zoo, so she could have some alone time. According to Juliana, Christine had planned to meet Joseph Ryan, whom she had met on a dating site. Juliana claimed she had forgotten the child's lunch and returned to the house to retrieve it, only to see an unfamiliar car parked in the driveway and a man, later identified as Joseph Ryan, entering the house. Alarmed, Juliana called Brendan, who instructed her to wait outside until he arrived. When Brendan arrived, they both entered the house together. Juliana admitted to making the initial 911 call, but hanging up quickly, unsure of what to say. Juliana took the Banfield's young daughter to the basement for safety, while Brendan grabbed his firearm and prepared to confront the situation. Moments later, noises from the upstairs bedroom caught their attention. They rushed to the room and found Joseph Ryan standing over Christine, who was lying naked on the bed, while Joseph, still dressed, held a knife. Brendan pointed his gun at Joseph, demanding he drop the weapon, but Joseph threatened to harm Christine if Brendan didn't lower his gun. What happened next was a chaotic and horrifying series of events. Joseph began stabbing Christine as Brendan fired his gun. Most of the shots missed their mark, failing to incapacitate Joseph, who continued attacking Christine. Desperate, Brendan yelled to Juliana to retrieve another firearm stored in a safe in the bathroom. When Juliana returned, instead of handing the gun to Brendan, she fired a fatal shot into Joseph's heart, ending the attack. The two then called 911 to report what had happened. Juliana's defense relied on this account, arguing that she acted purely in self-defense. However, the prosecution painted an entirely different picture during the hearing. They alleged that Brendan and Juliana had been romantically involved for months, and that the entire incident had been premeditated. According to the prosecution, Brendan pretended to leave for work that morning, but stayed nearby, waiting for a call from Juliana. The prosecution claimed that Joseph Ryan was lured to the Banfield home under false pretenses, believing he was meeting Christine for a romantic encounter. Allegedly, either Brendan or Juliana had created a fake profile of Christine on a dating site, communicating with Joseph to arrange the meeting. Friends and family of Christine, who later saw these conversations, described them as odd, claiming the writing style didn't match Christine's. On the day of the crime, Joseph reportedly arrived at the house and was greeted by Juliana, explaining the lack of forced entry. Shortly after, he was ambushed by Brendan, according to the prosecution's theory. They argued that the couple meticulously planned the scene to eliminate Christine, thus allowing Brendan to avoid dividing his assets in a divorce and to live a wealthy life with Juliana. A witness from a shooting range testified that Brendan and Juliana had visited the facility 2 months before the crime. Additionally, Brendan returned alone a month later to purchase a firearm, the same firearm Juliana used to kill Joseph. Investigators also revealed that both Brendan and Juliana replaced their cell phones just 4 days before the incident, which prosecutors saw as further evidence of premeditation. Photos taken of the Banfield home after Juliana's arrest showed significant changes. The room that had once belonged to Juliana was empty, and her belongings, clothing, makeup, and personal items had been moved into Brendan's bedroom. All photos of Christine and Brendan with their daughter had been removed and replaced with pictures of Brendan and Juliana, some of which included the child. While Juliana's defense acknowledged the possibility of a relationship between her and Brendan, they insisted it was not serious. They argued that both Brendan and Christine had been unfaithful to each other, casting doubt on the prosecution's narrative of a well-planned conspiracy. Brendan invoked the Fifth Amendment during his testimony, refusing to answer questions that could incriminate him, and provided minimal responses throughout the hearing. The prosecution also brought up Juliana's attempt to obtain a new passport, while her original had been confiscated during the investigation. They argued that this suggested an intent to flee the country. Juliana's defense countered, explaining that they had advised her to apply for a new passport as a valid form of identification, emphasizing there was no plan to escape. Despite this, the judge denied Juliana bail, ordering her to remain in custody until her trial. Meanwhile, Brendan was released but remained under investigation. Initially, he claimed responsibility for shooting Joseph Ryan, but after forensic evidence proved Juliana had fired the fatal shot, he altered his account. The Banfield's daughter was placed in the care of relatives as the legal proceedings continued. Months later, on September 16, 2024, police arrested Brendan Banfield, charging him with first-degree murder for the deaths of both Christine and Joseph. Prosecutors alleged that Brendan had conspired to kill them at the family's home, using a firearm in the commission of the crime. While the authorities did not disclose specific evidence linking Brendan to the murders, they revealed that he and Juliana had planned to Brazil just days before his arrest. During Brendan's first hearing, it was revealed that his relationship with Juliana began in August 2022, nearly a year after she started working for the family. At the time, Juliana had been in a long-distance relationship with a boyfriend in Brazil. The prosecution presented evidence that, a month before the crime, Brendan and Juliana had traveled together to New York, stayed in a hotel, and attended a show. On the morning of the incident, Brendan claimed he left home at 7:11 a.m. and stopped at a McDonald's for coffee, a routine part of his commute. He said he received a call from Juliana around 7:37 a.m., reporting that an unknown man had entered the house. Brendan said he rushed home, leaving his breakfast unfinished. However, during the hearing, prosecutors played the recording of Juliana's initial 911 call, which lasted only 8 seconds. In the background, Joseph Ryan could be heard groaning in pain before the call abruptly ended. When asked about this, Brendan claimed the dropped call was due to their inability to locate the phone after it fell. He admitted to instructing Juliana to retrieve the second firearm from the bathroom safe as a precaution. However, instead of handing him the gun, Juliana used it to shoot Joseph in the heart. The timeline of events raised significant questions. Authorities noted a 13-minute gap between Juliana's first 911 call and her second. Joseph Ryan was already injured by the time of the first 911 call, raising questions about why it took Brendan and Juliana 13 minutes to make the second call. Authorities believe this time was used to stage the crime scene. According to the prosecutor, Joseph's body was repositioned to make it appear as though he had been actively attacking Christine. Investigators revealed that the knife found at the scene belonged to Joseph Ryan and had been brought by him in a backpack. In conversations with the person he thought was Christine, Joseph had been encouraged to bring the knife due to a shared interest in certain fantasies. The website where Christine and Joseph communicated was geared toward casual encounters with a focus on fetishes involving pain and pleasure. This detail, authorities argued, conveniently supplied Brendan and Juliana with a prop to frame the scene. Paramedics who responded to the incident noted several inconsistencies. Both Christine and Joseph's bodies appeared to have been moved and repositioned. Joseph's arms were crossed and stained with Christine's blood in a way that would not have been possible given the fatal shot he sustained to the chest. Additionally, while paramedics worked to save Christine, Brendan reportedly showed little concern for her condition, asking repeatedly whether Joseph was still alive. Authorities believe this indicated Brendan's fear that Joseph might survive and reveal the truth about what happened. Blood spatter analysis further supported the theory of staging. Reports from forensic investigators, finalized in August 2023, confirmed that both Christine and Joseph had been moved after sustaining their fatal injuries. This evidence, along with text messages and witness statements, began to piece together the chain of events leading up to the crime. Before the incident, Joseph had confided in a friend about his communications with Christine. He mentioned that she claimed her marriage was open and that both she and her husband pursued relationships with others. Based on their online conversations, Joseph shared explicit details, including photos of the items he planned to bring to their encounter: a knife, cuffs, and belts. He also mentioned plans to cut Christine's pajamas with the knife, which matched the discovery of a torn pajama set in the bedroom. However, police found that Joseph had never spoken with Christine over the phone or through video chat. This detail became critical to the case. Authorities suspected that the person behind the profile was either Brendan or Juliana. If Joseph had spoken to Juliana, her distinct Brazilian accent would have raised suspicions, yet none of Joseph's friends mentioned him bringing up such a detail. Investigators speculated that Brendan might have fabricated a backstory to explain any discrepancies, such as claiming Christine had lived in Brazil for a time, accounting for the accent. Joseph's friends, who were interviewed by police, described him as a peaceful individual and expressed disbelief that he could have harmed Christine. They believed he had been manipulated into the situation, which ultimately led to his death. Between Juliana's arrest on October 19, 2023, and Brendan's arrest on September 16, 2024, the two maintained consistent contact. In a recorded conversation, Juliana questioned Brendan, saying, "I hope you're not staying with me just because you're afraid I'll turn on you." Brendan responded by telling her to be quiet. This exchange, among other pieces of evidence, raised further suspicion of their involvement in the crime. By late October 2024, Juliana agreed to a plea deal to avoid a full trial. She pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter and agreed to testify against Brendan at his upcoming trial, scheduled for February 2025. The prosecution stated that Juliana's sentencing would depend heavily on her testimony and the outcome of Brendan's case. During her confession, Juliana revealed how Brendan masterminded the entire plan. Their romantic relationship began in August 2022, roughly a year after Juliana started working for the family. By fall 2023, Brendan expressed his desire to get rid of Christine and began orchestrating the crime. Using a fake profile on an adult dating site that catered to fetish-based fantasies, Brendan posed as Christine and initiated contact with Joseph Ryan. Over time, he lured Joseph into arranging a meeting at the Banfield home, instructing him to bring specific items, including a knife. To make the setup more convincing, Brendan asked Juliana to speak to Joseph via a voice call on Telegram, pretending to be Christine. Juliana confessed that she was reluctant to participate, but ultimately complied. On the day of the incident, Brendan waited nearby after leaving the house under the pretense of heading to work. He instructed Juliana to handle Joseph's arrival and to play along with the charade. Juliana admitted to feeling trapped and fearful, but said Brendan's control over her left her with little choice. Juliana followed the plan and made the calls as instructed. However, Christine's phone went straight to voicemail because Brendan, before leaving that morning, had turned it off and hidden it in a kitchen drawer. Brendan, waiting at a nearby McDonald's, received Juliana's call and pretended to attempt to call Christine, knowing full well it would also go to voicemail. He then returned to the house, picked up Juliana and the couple's daughter, and entered the home through the basement. They left the child there before heading upstairs to the bedroom Brendan shared with Christine. Brendan carried his service weapon, and Juliana had the firearm Brendan had given her earlier that morning. When they entered the bedroom, they found Joseph holding Christine, who was naked. Brendan shouted, "Police!" before shooting Joseph in the head, causing him to fall away from Christine. Juliana then made the first 911 call, during which Joseph could be heard groaning in pain. Following Brendan's instructions, Juliana ended the call prematurely. Afterward, Brendan grabbed the knife Joseph had brought and stabbed Christine multiple times. Meanwhile, the 911 operator attempted to call back, but Juliana did not answer. Then Juliana noticed Joseph was still moving. She fired the fatal shot into his heart, as later confirmed by the medical examiner. Brendan then staged the crime scene, moving Christine and Joseph's bodies closer together to make it appear as though Joseph had attacked Christine. Once the staging was complete, Brendan instructed Juliana to make a second 911 call, in which she reported that an intruder had broken into the Banfield home and attacked Christine. When the police and paramedics arrived, Brendan accompanied Christine to the hospital, while Juliana went to the police department with the couple's daughter. The events that followed became the subject of widespread public scrutiny. Juliana's confession left little doubt that the crime was a conspiracy orchestrated by her and Brendan to murder Christine and begin a life together. Brendan's trial is set for February 2025, with Juliana's sentencing scheduled to follow shortly thereafter. Joseph Ryan's mother has avoided interviews to respect the investigation, but made a poignant social media post after Brendan's arrest, stating that living without her only son has been unbearably difficult. She added that her hope for justice is the only thing keeping her going. Both Christine's and Brendan's families have expressed deep shock and sorrow over the events. Christine was laid to rest at Queen of All Saints Cemetery in Suffolk County, New York. Meanwhile, the couple's 6-year-old daughter is reportedly under the care of close relatives. As for Joseph Ryan, no information about his funeral has been made public. The families involved remain haunted by the tragedy, while the nation watches closely for justice to be served. Case 7. It was supposed to be a quiet night in a peaceful neighborhood, but everything changed when a woman, bleeding from her forehead and with duct tape on her hands, showed up at her neighbor's door, pounding and screaming for help. "Someone's in my house," she cried. "My husband is dead." When the police arrived, they found the house in complete chaos. Furniture was overturned, things were missing, and in the bathroom, they discovered a man's lifeless body, his hands tied behind his back. At first, it seemed like a robbery gone wrong, but as investigators dug deeper, they uncovered secrets of betrayal and obsession, leading to a plan so shocking it left everyone stunned. What really happened that night? The truth was darker than anyone could have imagined. Angel Marie Wilson was born in 1973 in the United States and grew up in Sterling Park, Virginia. She attended Parkview High School, and while much of her early life remains private, she later married and had 4 children into the world. 2 daughters, Michaela and Victoria, and 2 sons, Aaron and Benjamin. Unfortunately, their union ended in separation, and while the divorce was still being finalized, Angel's life took a new direction. In 2011, while dropping her children off at school, Angel met Milton Henry Sawyer, a man whose children also attended the same institution. Milton, born on July 9, 1963, in North Carolina, was the son of Doris and Henry Sawyer and had a sister, 3 brothers, and a half-brother. Milton excelled academically, earning degrees in mathematics and computer science from the University of North Carolina. After graduating, he worked managing university data, but ultimately sought a career that aligned more closely with his interests. Milton had long been passionate about antiques and collectibles. Turning that passion into a livelihood, he established a successful pawn shop and antique store called the Counter of Stranger, which focused on collectibles and precious metals. The shop was conveniently located just 3 miles from his home. Although Milton was married and had 3 children, his personal life grew complicated, and a later extramarital relationship resulted in a 4th child. The divorce that followed was amicable, allowing Milton to move forward. Despite their 10-year age difference, Angel and Milton began a relationship and married in 2012. Angel adopted her husband's last name, becoming Angel Sawyer, and together they created a blended family of 7 children. Angel also became actively involved in Milton's business. The store was renamed Treasure Hunter, and Angel took the lead in reorganizing the inventory to enhance its appeal to customers. Her efforts, including revising prices and creating a more customer-friendly layout, were highly appreciated by Milton. For the next 6 years, their lives seemed idyllic. As the older children moved out, the family home eventually housed just the couple and their 2 youngest daughters. In 2017, Angel experienced a minor car accident that left her with lingering pain in her shoulder and hip. After consulting several doctors without finding relief, she was referred to Isaac Melcher, a practitioner of dry needling. This alternative therapy, similar to acupuncture but focused on muscles and tissues, offered a glimmer of hope for Angel, who was growing frustrated with traditional treatments. In the fall of 2017, Angel began her sessions with Isaac. The early appointments were professional, with their conversations centered on her treatment and general topics. Isaac recommended a plan involving 2 to 3 sessions per week, and Angel agreed, hoping to find relief from her persistent pain. As time went on, Angel's sessions with Isaac became increasingly personal. She began to confide in him about issues in her marriage, painting a picture of her life as one of restriction and control. She claimed her husband, Milton, was domineering, focused solely on work and their home. According to Angel, he didn't allow her to spend time with friends or even attend church alone because he didn't want her around other men. Ironically, she also described him as distant and uninterested, alleging that even if she were naked beside him, he wouldn't pay her any attention. Her revelations grew darker as she recounted episodes of emotional abuse, saying Milton often shouted at her, causing severe anxiety that left her vomiting or suffering panic attacks. These complaints fostered a bond between Angel and Isaac. Though Isaac was married and deeply religious, he couldn't ignore the growing connection he felt to this vulnerable and seemingly misunderstood woman. Angel's behavior became more suggestive, and in December 2017, she sent him a bold message offering to share a photo of herself naked in a jacuzzi. Despite knowing the risks, Isaac couldn't resist and accepted her offer. This marked the beginning of an illicit affair. Their first date was fraught with hesitation as Isaac expressed concerns about jeopardizing his career and his marriage. Angel appeared understanding and even offered to stop pursuing the relationship. However, during her next therapy session, she disrobed in front of him, breaking down his final reservations. The affair intensified, with the pair communicating through private messaging platforms and meeting regularly at the clinic under the guise of therapy sessions. By late 2017, their meetings occurred 3 to 5 times a week. In January 2018, their affair hit a snag. Milton began suspecting that Angel's therapy sessions were more than professional. Angel informed Isaac she could no longer attend his clinic. Isaac took this as a sign to end the relationship, but Angel pleaded, claiming she couldn't live without him and even hinting at suicidal thoughts. Whether genuine or manipulative, her words convinced Isaac to continue their affair. By April, Angel had persuaded Milton to allow her to return to therapy, claiming it was necessary for her health. Though the therapy sessions were short-lived, the affair continued in secret. Angel frequently expressed fears of what Milton might do if he discovered their betrayal, adding to the tension between the lovers. It was clear Milton had strong suspicions, but matters escalated over Memorial Day weekend when the two families coincidentally crossed paths at Jeanette's Pier, a popular fishing spot. Milton was visibly displeased to see Isaac there, and the encounter was equally uncomfortable for Isaac, though nothing transpired at the time. A few days later, one of Angel's daughters called Isaac's employer to warn them that Milton planned to confront Isaac at the clinic. The clinic's management, fearing a confrontation, contacted the Elizabeth City Police. Officers were sent to speak with Milton, advising him to avoid Isaac's workplace. Following this, Isaac reached out to Angel to check on her safety, worried Milton might have harmed her. Angel reassured him, saying nothing had happened yet. In June, Isaac's growing fear for Angel's safety reached a breaking point when he suddenly lost contact with her through their usual social media channel. After days of anxious attempts, he finally managed to speak with her over the phone. However, their conversation brought him no comfort. Angel explained that Milton had taken her phone, leaving her unsure if they could continue their communication or their relationship. By the end of June, Isaac was spiraling. Consumed by his obsession with Angel, he contemplated leaving his wife and their 3 young children to be with her. His thoughts were consumed with rescuing her from the supposed danger Milton posed. Angel confided that she was terrified of her husband and planned to move to Florida as soon as her daughters left for college. To Isaac, the idea of Angel leaving was unbearable, so he offered to find a safe place where they could continue their relationship away from Milton, whose suspicions of infidelity had grown. Though Angel repeatedly denied the accusations, Milton remained unconvinced. At some point, Milton even confronted Isaac at his clinic. Isaac firmly denied any relationship beyond professionalism, but tensions remained high. Everything came to a head in the early hours of August 2nd, 2018. A bloodied and frantic Angel appeared at a neighbor's door, pounding desperately. When the neighbor opened the door, they found Angel screaming hysterically, blood streaming from a gash on her forehead. Her hands bore remnants of electrical tape, and she appeared utterly terrified. Between sobs, Angel managed to say that someone had broken into her home and that her husband was dead. Alarmed, the neighbor immediately called 911. Emergency responders arrived quickly, tending to Angel's wound and carefully removing the tape from her hands for forensic analysis. After providing basic first aid, they transported her to the nearest hospital for further evaluation, while sheriff's deputies headed to the Sawyer residence to investigate her claims. At the house, the front door was locked, but the back door was ajar. The deputies entered and initially found nothing unusual. However, upon reaching the master bedroom, the scene shifted dramatically. The room was in complete disarray, clothes strewn across the floor, furniture overturned, and drawers emptied as though someone had been frantically searching for something. But the most disturbing discovery awaited in the bathroom, where Milton, 55, lay face down, his hands bound behind his back with electrical tape. He showed no signs of life. Milton's body exhibited early signs of rigor mortis, and no visible wounds indicated the cause of death. Bloodstains in the bedroom hinted at a struggle, and it initially appeared that a tragically wrong. However, a closer inspection of the house revealed strange details, such as the back door key left conspicuously on an outdoor table, a glaring oversight for any intruder. While crime scene investigators began processing the house and Milton's body was transported to the coroner's office, deputies headed to the hospital to speak with Angel. According to her account, only she and Milton had been home that night, as their daughters were staying with friends. She said she and Milton had been in their bedroom watching TV when she decided to fetch some snacks from the kitchen. As she opened the bedroom door, she came face to face with an armed intruder, dressed entirely in black and wearing a mask that concealed everything but his eyes. Angel described how the intruder, wielding what she identified as a long-barreled handgun, shouted at her to get on the floor. He cursed repeatedly, demanding money and valuables, claiming he knew they owned the treasure-hunting store and dealt in gold. The man forced Milton into the bathroom, ordered him to lie face down, and bound his hands with electrical tape. He then turned his attention to Angel, striking her in the head and rendering her unconscious. When Angel regained consciousness, she struggled to free herself from the tape. Once she managed to free one hand, she attempted to revive Milton, but he was unresponsive. Panicked, she fled the house and sought help from the nearest neighbor. In the days following Milton's death, the investigation progressed rapidly. Preliminary autopsy results revealed that Milton had died from asphyxia caused by neck compression. Investigators also confirmed that the intruder had entered through the back door, using a key that had been left conspicuously in plain sight. With this information, Angel was called back to the police station for further questioning. During this interview, she reiterated that Milton was a jealous man who didn't allow her to go anywhere alone. She explained that she spent most of her time at home with the children and relied on Milton for anything they needed. However, detectives were more interested in understanding why the back door key had been left so visibly accessible, particularly since the intruder bypassed the front door entirely, a detail unusual in cases like this. Angel explained that they had several children who frequently lost their keys, so leaving the back door key in an obvious spot had become their solution. She recounted the night of the incident, claiming that when she opened the bedroom door, she was confronted by the masked intruder. According to Angel, she was naked at the time and, fearing for her safety, grabbed one of Milton's shirts before complying with the man's order to lie on the floor. She said both she and Milton cooperated with the intruder's demands. The attacker tied their hands and demanded cash, jewelry, and the keys to their store, where he believed gold was kept. Angel struggled to explain how the intruder managed to subdue and move Milton, a man over 6 feet tall and weighing around 220 pounds. At one point, she said she tried to escape but was thrown to the ground, hitting her head on the edge of a table. She also claimed the intruder dropped his phone during the chaos. After helping him retrieve it, the man supposedly thanked God, took the phone, and left. Angel recounted how she freed one hand from her bindings, attempted unsuccessfully to wake Milton, vomited out of shock, and then sought help from a neighbor. Investigators questioned Angel multiple times, and during one session, she suggested a possible suspect, a man named Dylan, who had frequently sold stolen goods to their store. However, police quickly ruled him out as he was in custody at the time of the incident. The investigation took a dramatic turn when one of Milton's sons mentioned Isaac, Angel's therapist. He revealed that Milton suspected Angel and Isaac had a relationship beyond the professional, leading to significant arguments in the marriage. When questioned, Angel claimed Isaac had once been her therapist, but alleged he later harassed her with messages from fake accounts after she blocked him. With Isaac now on their radar, detectives visited him. Isaac denied any romantic involvement with Angel, but when asked to voluntarily surrender his cell phone, he claimed it had been damaged by spilled water and discarded. He said he had purchased a new device the same night of Milton's death from a convenience store, but had no receipt to prove it. When investigators checked the store, there was no record of such a purchase or any surveillance footage showing Isaac at the location. Detectives obtained a warrant to search Isaac's home, only to find that he had left for Oregon to visit his mother. His wife and children were also reportedly out of town. Meanwhile, Angel informed investigators that she had received a message from Isaac via a social media platform and handed over her phone. However, when police reviewed her phone, they found not only the message she mentioned, but also a series of exchanges that clearly indicated a romantic relationship between her and Isaac. Confronted with this evidence, Angel deleted the messages in front of the detectives, instantly raising suspicion against her. Isaac's conscience, however, was weighing heavily on him. While in Oregon, he reportedly confessed his actions to his mother. Encouraged by her advice, he also confessed to his pastor. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, the pastor contacted the sheriff's office handling the case. Detectives traveled to Oregon to interview the pastor, who agreed to help. At their request, he called Isaac to discuss the case, using a secure call application as requested by Isaac. Unbeknownst to Isaac, police were with the pastor, listening to the conversation on speakerphone. After exchanging pleasantries, which included Isaac's wife participating briefly, the pastor shifted the conversation to the subject at hand. He asked Isaac why Angel didn't simply divorce Milton. Isaac explained that Angel believed Milton would kill her if she tried to leave him. Driven by his love for her, Isaac admitted to abandoning his religious convictions and taking action. Isaac confessed that Angel knew more about the situation than she let on, but was aware that speaking up would implicate her, leading to her arrest and prosecution for conspiracy to commit murder. He also revealed that they were still in contact. This revelation gave police enough evidence to issue a warrant for Isaac's arrest. His confession also opened the door for investigators to question Angel again. Initially, Angel denied everything. Later, she admitted that during the supposed home invasion, she recognized the intruder as Isaac, but claimed she didn't reveal this earlier out of fear he would harm her as well. Angel maintained she had no knowledge of Isaac's plans, didn't provide him information about the night she and Milton would be alone, and didn't make the backdoor key accessible. However, it became clear that Angel knew the attacker was her lover. Though she initially claimed Isaac had harassed her, she eventually admitted to having a physical relationship with him, first claiming it happened twice, then 3 times, justifying it as a moment of weakness during a rough patch in her marriage. Yet, in another part of the interrogation, she claimed her relationship with Milton had been so strong in the 6 months prior that they were intimate nearly every day of the week. Angel alleged that Isaac pressured her to crush medication into Milton's food or drinks to kill him, even giving her a script of what to tell the police afterward. She claimed Isaac threatened her and her children if she didn't comply, though she insisted she never followed through with his demands. Her narrative was met with skepticism, and by late August, Angel was also arrested. On August 27th, a grand jury indicted both Isaac and Angel on first-degree murder charges. In February 2020, Angel faced an additional charge of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. Isaac's wife stated that she only learned of the betrayal the night Isaac confessed everything. He even told her that if he somehow avoided prison, he planned to build a life with Angel. She chose not to testify against her husband, exercising her legal right as his spouse. Meanwhile, the community mourned the loss of Milton, a respected and beloved figure. People placed flowers and tributes at the door of his store, Treasure Hunter. Financially strained due to the ongoing investigation, Milton's family was forced to organize a fundraiser to cover funeral and burial expenses. Thankfully, the community's generosity allowed them to give Milton a proper farewell. As the case moved toward trial, Isaac, 38, and Angel, 45, remained in custody without bail. Despite the gravity of their actions and the looming consequences, the pair continued their relationship by sending coded messages referencing love through Bible verses. By October 2020, Isaac, convinced that Milton's family deserved the truth, agreed to speak with police and detail Angel's involvement in the crime. He handed over a blanket, a bottle of lotion, and a perfume bottle Angel had given him, along with the keys taken on the night of the murder. In his confession, Isaac admitted he felt manipulated and foolish, realizing that sacrificing everything for Angel wasn't worth it. Seeking closure, he decided to testify against her. Isaac revealed that Angel convinced him she couldn't leave her marriage because Milton would hunt her down and kill her and Isaac. He recounted how he tried to persuade her otherwise, promising to protect her from Milton, but Angel insisted the only way out of her marriage was through Milton's death. Blinded by love, Isaac eventually agreed. According to Isaac's confession, they initially considered mixing high doses of Milton's medication with alcohol to stage an overdose. In fact, Angel had once mixed pills into Milton's beer, causing him to sleep deeply until the following afternoon. However, they ultimately abandoned this plan for the more direct and brutal method that ended Milton's life. After her failed attempts to poison Milton, Angel insisted that staging a robbery gone wrong was the best option to eliminate her husband. Isaac, however, felt uneasy about the plan, fearing that such a scheme would inevitably draw police attention. Despite his reservations, he continued to communicate with Angel through the secret conversation feature of a social media platform, an account Angel had set up because she suspected Milton had hacked her primary account. In late July 2018, communication between Isaac and Angel became increasingly difficult. To resolve this, Isaac bought Angel a phone and, as agreed, left it hidden under some cushions on her back patio. Angel, in turn, left him a bag containing her lotion, perfume, and a blanket, items Isaac later handed over to the police as evidence. Isaac confessed there was never a fixed date for executing the plan, as it depended on the absence of Angel and Milton's daughters from the house. He waited for Angel to alert him when the opportunity arose. However, on August 1, 2018, Isaac noticed unusual activity on their social media account and feared that Milton might have accessed their private conversations, exposing their plan. Convinced that Angel was in danger, Isaac decided to act immediately. That night, Isaac prepared a bag containing duct tape, anxiety medication, small bottles of alcohol, and a handgun, from which he removed the bullets, believing the sight of the weapon would be enough to subdue Milton. Around midnight, he arrived at the Sawyer home, found the back door key where Angel had indicated, and entered. Following voices to the bedroom, he was about to knock when Angel opened the door. With no way to turn back, Isaac proceeded with the plan. Isaac entered the room, pointed the gun at Milton, and ordered him into the bathroom. There, he bound Milton's hands behind his back, put him in a chokehold, and applied pressure to his carotid arteries until Milton passed out. To ensure he was dead, Isaac tightened the hold. Angel checked Milton's pulse and confirmed he had died. Together, they staged the scene to resemble a robbery. They took money from Milton's nightstand, emptied Angel's jewelry box, and ransacked the room. At Angel's request, Isaac tied her hands with duct tape and struck her to make the scene more convincing. Unsatisfied with the injury, Angel slammed her own head against the surface, causing the wound on her forehead. Isaac then left, leaving Angel to carry out the remainder of the plan. The rest of the story unfolded as previously reported. The trial for both accused began in September 2021 at the County Superior Court. Angel's defense team moved to dismiss the charges, citing insufficient evidence, but the motion was denied. Angel refused to testify during the proceedings, while Isaac took the stand, providing a detailed account of the events. His testimony was crucial to the case, but Angel's defense sought to discredit him, arguing that he was an unreliable witness motivated by a desire to reduce his sentence. After less than 30 minutes of deliberation, the jury returned a unanimous guilty verdict for both defendants on all charges related to the murder of Milton. Angel was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Isaac was sentenced to 20 years in prison, with a release date set for 2042. Angel appealed her conviction, but in March 2023, her appeal was denied. While she retains the option to petition a higher court, it is highly likely that Angel will spend the rest of her life in prison. To the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.